Hi, my name is Hamza. I'm actually a surgeon here at Homerton, and I'm the new Research and Innovation Director, and welcome to our annual Research and Innovation Conference. I'm very excited to share our speakers. We've got a very interesting lineup of speakers, and the theme of today's talk is all about innovation, so thinking beyond what we normally do. And that, for me, is why research is interesting, because it's all about thinking outside the box, finding a different avenue, and hopefully today we'll learn a bit more about that. I'm really excited as well because I'm a surgeon and I'm meeting people for the first time in this hospital. So please enjoy yourself this afternoon. We'll have a small lunch as well. And any questions, save it to the end of the conversation, at the end of this talk, and we'll direct it towards the speaker. Chairing our first session is Professor Narendra. Could I ask you to come on stage? And he will then start by introducing our first speaker. Thanks very much.
Slides on the end. People may talk.
It's all connected now.
Good afternoon, everyone. People online as well, and thank you for coming. May I invite our first great speaker, because he's connected to the babies as well. Louise Allen. She's a consultant pediatric ophthalmologist from Cambridge. And she's also associate professor at Cambridge University. She has been the consultant ophthalmologist for the last 30 years, and now she rightly changed into the research field with developing and testing the application of innovation to solve the needs of our patients, particularly our patients. Other
most important thing. All of that right there, after all.
Thank you. Off you go.
Thank you. Well, thank you for asking to come. You might say, well, why debate ophthalmology? It's a little subject, but actually ophthalmology is huge. We have the biggest outpatient numbers in all hospitals. We have 10 million patients seen in outpatients every year in the UK. 25 people going blind avoidably on our waiting list waiting to be seen. So it is a significant issue and one that needs a little bit of to try and sort out. Okay, so why should we innovate as a clinician? I think we see the premise. We know what the clinical need is. We know the best way probably to make it happen. So I think we probably have the best ideas. I think tech companies, they tend to have a solution and then they think, okay, so what's the problem? And I think that way around doesn't always work, certainly not in health service. So I think know what the problem is and then designing something to work within, hopefully, our setup is important. We can also act as the clinical champions. It's so difficult to get innovation adopted, but actually if you as the clinician are pushing it and say, look, this is going to make a real difference to our patients, then sometimes you can actually get it across that hurdle. The disadvantages, okay, is quite hard if you're not an academic. I'm not an academic, and you are. There's a little bit of this thing about questioning your motives when you're an innovator rather than a researcher, which is a problem. I've come across that quite a lot. I think people think that you're very conflicted and they should necessarily believe what you see or what you produce. And there's very little business knowledge. I'm the person who I'm useless at business, really useless. Where do you start? How do you get the advice that you need? And well, there are things now. I mean, hearing from Tony Young later on, he's the big guru about this, so I think he'll probably be helping us in the future. So I've told you a little bit about our problems in ophthalmology. We do have a significant issue. We have loads of patients coming to our outpatients. We have, my next project actually is a screening school, vision and hearing screening, which is about to be dropped. You know, 6 councils have gone bankrupt, they've dropped school screening. This is our safety net, really for picking up kids who've got visual and hearing problems within that period of neuroplasticity. Got to treat them early. Early detection is so important in pediatrics. And you know, so many of our units are short of ophthalmologists. I'm sure you're short of ophthalmologists here. Just can't recruit. We've got no hospital space. All of these patients coming in. Nearly every one of us probably will be seen in live care by the time. So you know, inadequate clinic space and inadequate screening tools as well. So the result is, as I said, huge backlog. A lot of patients using silent. So my innovation journey, it's been traumatic. So there are 4 major things that I've done. There's NECAM, which is being used, thank you to Rosie, in our maternity unit here in postnatal care, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. DigiViz, distance security app. This is an online app which enables people to test their vision at home with their own devices. So you can basically pair up your mobile phone, a mobile phone with a distant device, and it will work out your vision for you accurately. So then you can tell what your vision is. DigiBell does the same for hearing. So it's a hearing screening test. And iDot, which is one of the newer things I've done, which is it's a triage support tool. So it's an online branching logic questionnaire which comes up with a triage disposition. So hopefully patients who have an urgent eye problem will know where to go, signpost them to the right service, right time, right place. Okay. So those are the 4. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. The cycle. This is the cycle you have to go through, unfortunately. The first thing is IP, intellectual property. So if you think you have a good idea, don't grab it in a meeting like this, okay? Because as soon as it becomes public property, it's no longer protected. So although you really might want to sound people out, do it in a very private manner, don't do it publicly. So think about IP as you begin your journey. Early stage funding, there are quite a few little seed funds out there that you can apply to. Certainly my big break came from Adverse Charitable Trust, which gives sort of quite small chunks of money, about 30,000, 40,000, but that can actually give you that first prototype, or first proof of concept study that will help you get kick-started. Prototyping, we're fortunate to have loads of prototyping companies to choose from, but that's actually a little bit expensive. Translational funding then pushes it through to try in sort of real-world scenarios, and then you go on to the final commercial product development and clinical validation, which takes a lot of money. We'll talk about the things that can support you to do that. Health economics is a big part of it, but you know what's really silly is that you do this health economics, you say, well, it's going to save the NHS this much money in time and space and things like that. And at the end of the day, it doesn't seem to affect adoption at all, because actually with social staff, there's usually a crisis that will push adoption, rather than actually looking at what we're going to save in 5 years' time. It doesn't actually make any difference at all. Business funding scaling and NHS procurement and adoption, probably the hardest hurdle at the end. And if you look like this by the finish line, you're very lucky. Unlike, you won't be looking like that, you'll be looking haggard. Right, so these are the funding streams that you can apply for. So the academics, unfortunately, it's really annoying actually, because as a clinician, I wasn't really eligible for the MRC grants. And what was terribly frustrating is I had to get the professor in paediatrics in Cambridge to apply with me as a co-applicant, but it was my project. So he got the glory and I did the work, which is very annoying. But I got 2 confidence and concept grants from the University of Cambridge on MRC funding. Translational money out there, you get this BRI, which is sort of business or a business type fund. Innovate UK is also really good business. I've been fortunate enough to get a couple of NIHR I4I awards, which are looking for translation and how things work in the real world. It's helpful. And I've also had an NIHR ENI grant, which can be helpful as well in real world practice. And then once you've sort of proved yourself, you've got the evidence, then you go on to try to commercialize your product, and this can be done with angels or VCs or industry. It's a minefield. The problem is that only 5% of innovations, proven innovations, are actually going to make it to patient care. You think that huge amount of money, I showed you those funds, that's gone into making the thing, and now you have a very tiny amount, if any, to actually get it into patient care. So they've got a huge amount of innovation, but hardly any reaches the patient. There's such a huge waste of resource and everybody's time and effort. And I think that's something we really need to try to improve. So, my first little one, NECAM. I've already started this 10 years ago to improve the accuracy of internal cataract screening in newborns. So my problem as an ophthalmologist, I'm sitting there and I'm having patients coming at a year old, they've got bad squint, they've got nystagmus, they can't see very well, and they've got cataracts. And so I think, well, if that cataract was there at birth, and it's been missed, which 30% are in value screening, that baby's never going to see, because you learn to see in the first 2 months of life. If you don't have vision then, you're never going to see. It's not like an adult cataract where you can wait for a while to get cataract out and then they can see again. They're never going to learn to see, so they're going to be blind forever. Okay? But I don't know, when I'm seeing that parent, has that cataract been there, or has it developed subsequently? Because if it's been there since birth, nothing I can do is going to be able to help. And actually, if it's developed subsequently, then I can do an operation and we may have a chance of getting some sight. It's a horrible situation to be in, worse for parents. Terrible. And I think bad screening is worse than no screening, if you ask me, because it gives the patients a false sense of security that they've actually had the screening. So we use a lot of infrared light. I mean, this is not a game-changing invention. We use a lot of infrared light in ophthalmology because it doesn't constrict people. And the great thing about infrared is it's equally reflected from the back of the eye, whether you're Caucasian or whether you've got very dark pigmentation, it's reflected the same way. Whereas what we're currently using, white light, is reflected differently depending on the pigmentation of the back of the eye. So you tend to get a different reflex, the harder to see reflex in dark pigmented eyes. So this is part of the problem. So I came up with my first prototype. This was funded by ACT, which is a sort of seed fund, innovation fund, which is a hospital running, got about 25,000 for it, and I basically got a phone. The problem with mobile phones is their cameras, their front-facing, rear-facing cameras got an infrared filter in. So of course that doesn't going to work. So you have to change the camera. And then not all of the mobile phones will let you change the camera. So I modified the phone. And then you put a little, you can't see it, but on the back surface of this is a little hardware attaching to it, which has got an infrared beam splitter. And it gives this coaxial infrared light, which allows you to see the reflection from the back of the eye in infrared, which is bright white. And what you end up getting is you get this dark splodge, which is usually centrally in kids with cataracts, which is the cataract silhouetted on the bright background. So that's the principle of the thing. So I was thinking about IV, so turns out that there was actually some protectable IP in there, but it was quite difficult to pick out. And I had my early stage funding. I did my proof of concept study free because I used the medical students in Cambridge, good lot to use. He went and was seeing the baby with the camera, and they proved the concept. And basically, the camera showed 100% sensitivity and specificity in my clinics, which is an enriched population of baby cataracts, and that gave me evidence I needed to get more funding. So this is the steps you have to go through. Then I managed to sweet talk a venture capitalist to give us money to get a prototype. And these prototypes were sent off with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine off to Uganda, Malawi, Tanzania for a couple of years. They did a big study over there, showed that it worked well. What you can see here is this child's not a significant, their right cataract, so it's on the left side, it's actually right cataract, so it's blocking the reflection of the white light. You see how easy it is to see? Pretty straightforward. So after that London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine study, finally I got funding from the NIHR to do the EMI study, and this is what's currently ongoing at the moment. So it's a £2 million study. Unfortunately, these cataracts are so rare, like 1,000 kids, 140,000 babies to get the number of cataracts we need to show significance. Huge number, huge number. So 25 units throughout England I'm using to try and increase baby. And you are involved in this. Rosie single-handedly at the moment is screening the babies. Well, that's good. So keep on. Yeah, it's got a few more to go, but so at the moment we've found 4 cataracts, which is higher prevalence than you think it might be. So that's my near-cap journey, 8 years. I think probably this is another slide, I think it's more like no now. So I'm going to show you this. So ITV, it's always quite nice when you get the media coverage. So I might.
First tonight, the breakthrough treatment to help prevent blindness in babies and children that could change the way eye screening tests are done worldwide.
Currently, 1 in around 3,000 babies are born with cataracts, which could leave them without sight because signs can be missed during routine testing at birth.
Yeah, but now a consultant based at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge has come up with a new device which can check far more accurately, allowing cataracts to be removed before they have a permanent impact. Matthew Hudson reports.
Cataracts in babies are rare, only 1 in around 3,000 births. But if not treated in the first few months, it can mean a lifetime without sight. So mums Amaka and Charlotte were happy to let staff at Addenbrooke's use a risk-free new camera to check the telltale signs in their new babies, Caitlin and Elizabeth. Both are fine.
I think it's good because it will help other moms, it will ease the stress when they know they have enough time and then they can get treated to stop the blindness thing from childbirth. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
I think it's very important to know that there's new ways to find out things and to be really sure that there's going to be nothing wrong.
Cataracts in adults are easy to treat successfully, but our brains can only learn how to see in the first 3 months. If cataracts are removed too late, we never learn to see. Babies are automatically tested for cataracts using a bright white torch called an ophthalmoscope. But it causes the pupil to shrink, making it hard to evaluate accurately. That's particularly true of Black and Asian infants, because darker pigmentation behind the eyes makes it even harder to spot cataracts. Around a third of genuine cases are currently missed at birth, while false positives subject other parents to needless distress. The NeoCam uses infrared light, which doesn't affect the pupil or agitate the baby, and records the images so they can be studied. Midwife Robin Murray has been involved in the trial.
Okay, we'll stop it there.
First-
It's quite nice to get that sort of prophecy. Okay, so that's NeoCam. So moving on, DigiLose and DigiBell. So the main problem here is how can we increase the capacity in the clinics and ensure that patients didn't come to harm when they were waiting for their appointments. And this is where remote consultation fits in. So we know that the NHS long-term plan is very pro-remote consultation. Patients can be slightly iffy about it, it's true. But some people find it very helpful. They don't have to come to the hospital all the time. They don't have to get kids out of school, things like that. So there are pros and cons. But basically, remote consultation is here to stay, and I think it's going to be the way that we can increase our capacity in the eye clinic, and to ensure that patients can self-monitor so they can pick up any issues and get them treated. So again, we started off with the IP, and it was a very weak IP story. And I think this is the take-home message. Don't worry if your IP is weak, because it's almost certainly going to be something that's protectable sooner or later, but it may not seem so at the time. So unfortunately, what tends to happen when you go to somebody like Cambridge Enterprise, which is the commercial arm of the university, all they are interested in is the patent. And if you don't have a patent on a plate for them, they say, oh, at all, and then you lose it, really. So don't be too put off. Just keep on plugging away, and if they can't see the value in it, you will eventually get something that's protectable. Anyway, so I got early stage funding. This is my Confidence and Concepts grant with the Professor of Pediatrics, and then we got the prototype lab, the proof of concept on it, and again it worked very well. So done like 2 published validation studies on it, which showed it's equivalent to clinical testing and DigiBell, that's just being validated at the moment at Addenbrooke's on kids who've got who come into audiology clinics to see if that's a good screening device. And this, of course, this sort of cropped up during COVID, and that was what really helped me get their funding. So there were some good pros of COVID as well as cons. And so then I got this Upright Challenge Award, which has allowed me to do more validation and to test it in various, there's a big study, the revised study, which is also going on at the same time as the NeoCam study. I'm busy at the moment, and that's being done at CUH NWAT, Peterborough and Manchester, to see how we can improve the remote consultations in our clinics to reduce the backlog. Can you bear another one? So IDOT, IDOT, there's so many problems not for this one. So IDOT is really there to stop patients needlessly coming to ED. So I had this idea where I saw ED getting in terrible shape, it still is. And a lot of the patients that come with eye problems don't need to be there. If you bring up NHS 111 and say, I've got a floater in my vision, they'll say, you need to get to ED within 6 hours. Completely crazy, completely crazy. And they'll just be sent away back home again when they come to ED. So it's not fit for purpose, it's very risk averse, and my idea was, well, how can we make this better? So I developed this branching logic MCQ, which could signpost patients to the right service, or rather than the patient getting the result, which is always a little bit difficult, it actually comes to the person who's ordered the test and tells them what to do, supports them to know what to do. So this is much quicker because I learned from my previous mistake. So I didn't involve the trust for this except to do the research work, and I didn't involve a Cambridge enterprise, which was helpful. We set up our own company, we just bootstrapped it, and bootstrapping means that you fund it yourself. And we just worked around it, so it's got much. Whilst I also got another IFRI grant to actually implement this in the community with optometrists to see how they come about it, and that's worked very well. So I'm coming to the end. Poor old Cypsis, trying to push this boulder up the hill. So be prepared to make mistakes and pivot. It's going to be a long journey. I think there is a lot more knowledge now, and sharing the knowledge, especially with things like the National Clinical Programme. There's a lot more support out there. I think what I got most upset about is that people think I'm doing this for the wrong reasons and I'm just doing it to make some money. I haven't made any money yet. I've spent far more than I've made, I can assure you that. And it's just a shame that that taints people's thoughts about your innovation. There's a lot of resistance to change. People are worried that you're going to be taking their jobs away. Gosh, we need staff in the NHS, but aren't we going to make people redundant? There are lots of procurement barriers, very ancient types of contracts which don't work for software. Don't get put off if your idea isn't immediately patentable, because chances are you'll think of something that is protectable. And just be prepared. What seems to you like completely obvious, I mean, when you look at those images of the babies, you think, oh, why spend £2 billion on this study? It's going to take years to come to fruition. Hopefully, I'm still waiting for it to come to fruition. But I'm patient. And then, just like Marshall said, a lot of people help me on the way. These are some of them, probably not all of them. But we do need a sort of good group of people, and especially, of course, when it comes to implementing innovations in the real world, to have trust, put out their hand and say, yeah, we'll be aside for this project. That's a huge deal as well. Giving their time and effort to research projects to show that the innovations are working. Thank you.
Doris, thank you so much. Very inspirational. Let's hope at least someone in this room will follow this stuff. Questions?
So yeah, firstly, thank you for a fantastic talk. I was feeling truly inspired.
Good.
Yeah, I can't believe. I mean, that tool that you created to identify cataracts in children seems so. What I love about it is so simple.
But it is simple. I mean, what is it?
But I also think you simplify everything because you've moved from bubble to bubble. So for the audience and for us, so when we hit a roadblock, what happens? How do you kind of go beyond that? How do you think beyond that? How do you find the motivation to keep going?
Good question.
I think you have to be quite self-driven, really. I mean, I've put so many hours into this.
I'm happy that I honestly, you just put a simple circle and like you do this. I've tried those steps. That's not a simple thing. We've invested 10 years in a project, probably more. I would guess. So how do you keep going? That's my real question.
I think it's just a personal thing. I just get my teeth or something. I just can't let it go. I think when I've invested a certain amount of time, it's one of those things I don't put so much into this so far.
Can't let it go.
I've got to go to my baby, I've got to get it somewhere. Yeah.
Thank you. Two managers. Anyone?
What one piece of advice would you give to a new innovator that comes to you?
Try and find somebody to talk to who might have done it already. Yeah, because there's a lot of time you can save if you find somebody who's been through it before. I can direct you. I didn't have anybody in those years. Which I have.
So just as you can see, as you've said,
media coverage obviously can carry quite a lot of weight with, you know, getting things out. How did that come about? Obviously, it was quite late on, probably in the process. But were you approached? Did you have to literally get out there and bang on doors, or it's horrible self-promotion? That's another thing. Thank you. You know,
Yeah.
because it's not something we like doing as medics, is it? Self-promotion. So that's the second ITV thing I did. The first one was actually 5 years ago or so. So Matt Thompson, who's the guy who's arranging that, came again. And we're quite lucky, we've got a very public relations person at the CUH, so he looks at things like that. And then I've been lucky because, my lovely patients, they nominated me for various national awards and things. I think all of those things really
Combination of those.
help, because people then look at you on LinkedIn and say, oh, yeah, maybe I should listen to her. So it's luck. There's a lot of luck involved and hard work.
Hard work.
Yeah.
Any, I don't know any hands are there online, because if people are online want to ask any questions.
Yes.
Can we?
We don't have.
Okay. Anyone else? I know I did a simple, very strong mind up there, and that proof of concept, it works. That is what I could have thought of that. We've been playing with the children 30 years. That is why you are different. Yes.
That's in a good way.
In a good way, absolutely in a good way. So many people scream babies for our kids. Come on, so tremendous credit for you. Thank you so much. Now, may I invite our next speaker who will guide you on more, Dr. Veena Mohan. She is an innovation manager at Health Tech Enterprise, working with clinical innovators like you to protect, develop, and commercialize their ideas. She also holds PhD in biochemistry from University of Cambridge. And prior to that, she worked for several years as a scientist in fast-moving consumer goods. She has generated and registered patents as well. So she underwent same culture like you. So she's going to teach us how to make it easy life. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon all. I'm Veena Mohan, as you mentioned, introducing you to Health Tech Enterprise and the services we offer to our NHS Trust, essentially, and to Homerton currently as well. So, Health Tech Enterprise, we are a medical technology consultancy based in Cambridge. Essentially, a spin-off from Royal Bradford Hospital back in 2006. So, here we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year in November. We work with a number of clients, especially somebody from industries, academic institutions, or healthcare organizations like NHS. And we work with all the innovators and help them to convert their innovative ideas into reality. So we have a consultancy arm at Health Tech Enterprise. I will be saying as HTE, that's Health Tech Enterprise. Particularly, we offer these consultancy services to universities and industries. So you can see a number of services here. I will just briefly go through them. So we act as like a technology transfer company where we act like a bridge between technology transfer. So act as a bridge between healthcare delivery and the innovators who are developing these technology. So we help the innovators provide some insights. So what they need to do to get their products into market. We do conduct a lot of tailored interviews with key opinion leaders, addressing questions, what they need to answer if they are developing the right product for the right market. We do a lot of market research, which is very essential for you to fully understand the commercial opportunity, as well as the competitive landscape of the product. For example, is there a real unmet or a clinical need for that particular innovation? who's going to buy your product? Are there any existing products or services in the market? Are there any competing ones out there? So all these basic questions you need to answer before you go and ahead with the innovation. Commercialization, IPM commercialization. This is where we try to see, as Luis have actually mentioned quite a lot of things from my presentation, so you might be already familiar with few of them. IPM commercialization, where we try and see whether we can protect the IP, whether in the form of patents or copyrights or design rights, etc. We also help in commercializing your product to existing manufacturer, or help you setting up a new company if that is the proper route to go forward with that. Health economics, buster maybe nowadays. So this is where we have experienced health economists in our team who can help you with assessing the financial impact of your technology in the healthcare market. She does many competitive modelings to see and compare your innovation to the existing models and see what the financial impact is going to be in the system. It's also associated with net zero, so NHS wants to be the first net zero healthcare services and pledged to do that by 2055. We have experts in the team who can do the modeling work and see what would be the carbon impact of your innovation throughout their journey. Money is very important. You all need funding to progress your innovation. So we do help the innovators find appropriate funding which are relevant for their innovation, and that completely depends upon what stage of the innovation you are at. So whether that's going to be an early stage grant funding opportunities, or as Luis mentioned, some translational research from an AHR or in the UK, or some VC or angel investment towards the end of the later stage of the development pathway. Regulations and human factors. Human factor is basically developing a set of products which also meet the user requirements. We also help with all the regulations. We help you with going through what are the regulatory roadmap you need to go through for getting the regulatory approval for placing your product either in the UK, EU, or international markets. Evaluation, we do conduct a lot of evaluation studies rolling out new technologies in the healthcare settings. So this can give you an idea of how your technology is going to work in a real world environment after all the research and product development. It also helps to understand what you need to learn from those studies and also help to secure new customers or scaling up the existing one. So as mentioned, HT works across the whole innovation development pathway. I know that is shown here as a very linear step-by-step one, but I remember from Luis' presentation, it's a curved up and down journey. It might be a bit like that, but I don't want to discourage you by saying that it's going to be complicated. So generally, a clinician comes to us with an idea or an unmet need they want to solve. So we think about all the questions I told you before, doing all the market research or the initial assessment at HTE. And also we work on seeing whether how the intellectual property is going to be, whether we can protect it in any way. Doesn't necessarily to be a patented one, it can be a trademark or design rights or copyrights and anything. Once that initial assessment is done, and then we think, okay, it's worthwhile going forward with that innovation, we make a decision with the innovator as well as the trust. And if that answer is like, okay, we have gone through all the filtering criteria, and if that is an S, very good, then we'll go forward with that next step, which is developing the concept, where we need to gather some user insight, what are the user needs are, what are the user requirements are, and then you need to build a prototype to test your product and see that there's a real value in creating that product further. If the manufacturers want to place a product on the market, they need to go through some regulatory approval, but it can be a CA marking in EU. You might be aware of the new UK CA marking after the Brexit, and for FDA in USA. Clinical validation studies are done to demonstrate the safety and efficacy of your product in settings which benefit the patients the most. At this point, you might be a bit more clear about the commercialization route you want to take, whether it's licensed licensing it to an existing manufacturer or a company. If that's the way, we can help you with finding some commercial partners. Or you might want to set up a new company, and if that's the route you want to take, we can work with partners who have the experience in getting these evidence-based innovation into systems for further adoption and diffusion across different markets. We work across a number of NHS trusts for over 20 years now, and we have a growing list of NHS members now. Recently added Homerton. Very welcome, Homerton, and we are very looking forward to receiving innovations from you all. And then recently added list includes UCL and as well as the St. George one, and we make sure that the innovations coming from you all are properly identified, developed, and then commercialized for the benefit of patients. So this is NHS IP and commercialization we offer to NHS trust members, and this is where this is the team where I belong to. We have quickly gone through some of them, which includes protecting the IP, and so this is where we conduct the patent prior art search, looking to see what the current IP position is, and then develop evaluate the IP position, and also then developing a strategy for protecting that particular IP. Prototype development, Louis has mentioned about EG technology. We do have access to a number of product development partners whom you can get access to and develop your prototype and doing some early feasibility testing. Funding and investment, we have covered that in a consultancy one. So this is important for everyone. So we will look and see what the developmental stage of your innovation is. And depending upon that, we will advise you on specific funding opportunities. We can find funding opportunities for you and help you with writing the applications, reviewing it before you submit it to the grant funding bodies. Training, we do conduct a number of webinars and also bespoke or face-to-face events. I have covered a separate slide for that, so we will work on that later. Commercialization, I have mentioned, whether depending upon the route you want to take, whether you want to license your technology to an existing company or you want to set up a new company, we can help you with that service. Clinical Innovators Network, so this is an event we conduct roughly 2 or 3 times a year. So this is an opportunity for any clinical innovators to gain some entrepreneurial skill and also attend the mentoring session with a number of experts from technical and commercial side. So this event, you'll be able to get one-to-one mentoring session with somebody from IP, regulatory, product development. There will be people from funding bodies like Innovate UK and NIHR. So it's a great opportunity, very great, I would say, a learning and networking opportunity for clinical innovators who have an idea for a medical technology innovation. I will go through a few of the NHS innovation case studies to give you some more motivations to come up with some more innovations. So first we start with ablators. So this is effectively a spin-out from Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital. So this is a way of treating fibroids. So fibroids are these tumors grown in the womb, which causes heavy bleeding, painful and long periods. So they thought about it. So there are currently few treatment methods available which are not less very invasive, not readily accessible to all patients. So they thought about a way of changing that. And then that's where the Luna was created by ablators. So this is a next generation radio frequency technology enhanced by direct electric current. The patent was recently granted to this technology in EU, US and Japan. They are in an advanced prototype developmental stage. I have received a number of funding and have raised over 3 million each and VC funding to date, and they are expecting to go through the regulatory approval of CE marking within 2 years' time. Lawrence is from University of Cambridge. So this is a real-time monitor for neonatal transfer services. So the current problem they are having is this is very challenging for this neonatal transfer services to meet the current required target of 60 minutes of time critical transfer. So they developed a cloud-based system for neonatal transfer. So that includes a prototype. I think they have built it, and it includes one screen where all the teams included in the neonatal transfer and the hospitals.
Sorry.
That's fine. Whoever is involved in the neonatal transfer, they will be able to share information across teams in real time, and if they want to make a quick decision for the time critical travel transfers, they will be able to make that decision quickly without any delay. They are in the very early stage of development now, but have received a huge number of appreciation for this invention. I think this is the last case study, which is Campro. So this is a medical device designed to change the way the biopsy for prostate cancer is currently taken. So they developed a medical device that can be used in a more sterile environment. And the current way of taking biopsy is transrectally, so they wanted to change the way that is currently done in a more sterile way of doing it transcranially using local anesthetic. This is from University of Cambridge Hospital by the consultant Vincent. He received also the NIHR translational funding around 800K, and that made him to go through that product development stage and so doing some clinical trials. This product is now licensed to JEB Technologies and is currently on the market now. I have mentioned about this webinars. So we do conduct a lot of webinars in different topics. Some in developing your medtech, IP and commercialization strategies, funding and investment. We also do one in human factors and usability engineering, regulatory medical devices, selling into NHS and health economics. There are two upcoming ones. One is the IP and commercialization strategies, which is coming next month in April. And another one, the provisional date for the funding and investment webinar is 2nd of May. Here you will be able to attend the live webinars. We also have some pre-recorded webinars, but these are live webinars, so you can meet the experts from that particular field and ask any questions you may have during that webinar session. So what you need to do is go to your website, go to the event session or training session, register your interest, and then we will send you the links for attending those webinars. Might be more interesting, I think. Health Innovation Sprint. So you might be a bit familiar with the term Innovation Sprint or Hackathon. So this is where I create a group of problem-solving sessions where you will be able to be with all the experts I have mentioned before, like IP expert, regulatory, product development. You can be in the middle of all these people, and then you can develop your idea and see how it's going to move forward. So we are going to have two innovation sprint events, one in May on 17th in Cambridge, and the one on 7th of June in Norwich. You are welcome to attend any of those events. What you need to do is, if you have an idea for an innovation, you need to submit as an application through our website. So I have put the link here. So if you need to, you go through the website, submit the application, and the deadline for closing is April 19th. If you have any questions, please do feel free to contact us. Don't think that innovation is a rocket science, like you might not know. So it can be a simple thing. So if you have any doubt, please don't be reluctant. You can contact us ahead and ask any questions you may have before the submission deadline. Okay, then this is the innovation team, and Carol and myself, and is our CEO. She's very experienced in business development, innovation management, and technology transfer. Dr. Karen Lowe is the head of innovation. Karen is online. She's an experienced IP and commercialization professional, having over 50 years of experience in identifying, evaluating, developing commercial innovations from research area. I myself, you already had a brief intro about me before, so I'm not going to go back again. So I work as an innovation manager at Enterprise, joined around 2 years back, nearly 3 years back. But most of my history of my career is in research, being as a research scientist working in 2 companies. That's it. I have provided some homework contact details here. So if you have any questions, please do feel free to contact us later, or I'll be here for the event until the end of the day. So come and talk to us if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Reena, for one more very exciting. Also, perfect time. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Is it a free service? How does it work?
You stole my question.
So Homerton is already a part of our NHS member trust, so you don't have to worry anything about that. So you just need, what you need to do is come back, contact us, or contact
Christine.
Christine, sorry, Christine, so we can talk about whatever innovation you have in mind.
If you get support, is it then do you hold on to the IP of your idea, or is it just
It's your IP policy of the NHS trust, so it should be the trust will be the IP holder. So you will be the inventor, but I think according to the IP policy of the trust, is it?
We subscribe to, I don't know what you call it really, we have a subscription with you.
Service level mental health enterprise.
So I was going to introduce you.
You will get your share as well.
Oh, yeah.
No problem. Louis.
Oh, sorry, that was part of my question. I think the amount the inventor gets from if it's successfully licensed or sold or whatever is dependent on whether it's come through UCHE, whether it comes through you or Cambridge Enterprise. So the university basically has a much better system of splitting profits with the inventor
Yeah.
than the NHS.
This one is with the.
I know it's going to change.
I'm going to say that when Tony comes this afternoon, I think he's going to talk a lot about IP, which is very interesting in the way things are going. Yeah, do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a little way in, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem.
Can I ask, what do you see as the common mistakes when people are trying to make something out of nothing? What do you see as the things that they could improve in escalating their ideas?
Yeah, I think one of the problems is everybody thinking eventually it's like a rocket science. It has to be something very dramatic or some breaking or groundbreaking on. It can be like a simple, it can be like a product or a service that can improve the service, something that optimizes the currently existing problem. So if you have an idea, you come and talk to people who are expertise in this field, like HTET, you have the services already accessible to. You're very welcome to come and contact us. This is not like a one-person game doing everything. We need the expertise from several different areas, so we'll be able to help you with that. I think people kind of be reluctant to come and approach people and getting that early support.
Key is, as soon as you have some idea, contact Christine and she will put you in touch.
Okay, no problem. Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Any burning questions? Otherwise, shall we say thank you? Now the last speaker of the first session is our own Catherine. She's a consultant, AHP consultant in neurorehabilitation at Homerton, and Catherine provides strategic development and support to stroke and neurorehabilitation pathways across Homerton, City and Hackney, and North East London. She has been involved and is involved in a number of national research projects. Thank you. Over to you.
Lovely. So I was just thinking about the title of the conference today and beyond the conventional, and I suppose what I'm about to present is a little bit unconventional for us talking about things in the NHS in this sort of conference, and certainly for today because it's a qualitative piece of research. which doesn't often get shared. But it's something that I feel really passionate about, and I think it's something really interesting. And also as AHPs, as an occupational therapist by background, I think I'm very good at actually getting involved and getting dirty with rehab, never mind creating our own probability. We've got a really nice example this afternoon of not only research but also innovation led by a speech therapist. So this is really an overview of my qualitative study as part of a master's in advanced clinical practice in neurorehab. So it's quite niche, so I'll try and focus a little bit more on the methodology that I use and hopefully help sort of give some ideas as to why it's important that we do research. As clinicians, however big or small that is, it's a great starting point. So my clinical caseload is a neuronavigator, and this is an increasing sort of role within the NHS to support one of the more complex, costly, but also cost-effective pathways, which is neurorehabilitation. So what we've seen over the last decades really is an increasing complexity of neurodisability as a result of getting much better at keeping people alive, fundamentally. And that's within neurosurgery, within acute, within ED. And what we'll see is that as these increasingly complex patients come through the system itself is not streamlined. There's massive regional variation, and the pathways itself are not clear. And often people get lost, and certainly patient feedback around their experience of having had a stroke, a traumatic brain injury, a space-occupying lesion, and that need then for rehabilitation is really mixed. This particular area of neuronavigation focuses really on highly specialist neurorehab. So here in the Homerton, we have the RNIU, the Regional Neuro Rehab Unit, we have HGNIU, which is our level 2 neuro rehab unit based at St Leonard's. So there at the top right-hand side, we've got the level 1, level 2 is underneath it. And these are people who require really quite extensive specialist neuro rehab, often in inpatients. But how do they get there? And you can see it's not really a pathway, it's much more of a web. Neuro rehab is a web. How people access it, how they get through it. But we see that there's very little research into it, and certainly in terms of how we support people through it. So neuronavigation was a developing model over the last 10 years. In London in particular, it sort of gathered the name neuronavigation, but actually that's predominantly based in London, but there are similar roles across the country. And what we found is that when I was looking into this, there was no real clarity as to what it is. The regional variation, different people do it differently, the expectations are different around it, and that in itself causes additional problems. Not only have you got a system that's really complicated, but then you have people that may or may not be helping you through that system. In London itself, we have a group of what we call neuronavigators, and we all do it differently. So the idea was, let's explain it, what actually is neuronavigation. Let me see what it says in the evidence, in the literature. Is there any? The answer is no. To my knowledge, this is the first piece of research looking specifically into what is neuronavigation. So to start that process of having sort of qualitative inquiry is probably the best place to go. Let's ask people who are doing the job, what are their perceptions, what are their thoughts, what are their experiences of neurorehab. So my aim was to explore the meaning of neuronavigation with neuronavigators, people undertaking that role. And I focused on London and the South East because we already have quite an established group of people who are doing that, who are talking about the same sort of thing. I wanted to understand the key dimensions of what it is that they consider neuronavigation to be, and therefore what are the potential outcomes of that. Is there a theoretical model or basis that we're all doing it within, and what's the influencing factors? We know it's a complex system. So, like I said before, when there's very little evidence, starting off as a qualitative inquiry, looking at perceptions and experiences is a really good place to start. And I decided to use virtual focus groups. Focus groups are a really good way of understanding perceptions and experiences. And obviously we've got so much better, haven't we, at using virtual mechanisms like digital on Teams. Some of the problems with that can be that establishing rapport and the benefits of focus groups is all that interaction, isn't it? As opposed to a one-on-one interview, in a focus group, you've got that lovely chat and discussion, and it really leads to rich, deep data. And sometimes if it's a virtual focus group, people don't have that connection. However, this particular group of people that I was targeting, they were used to using that particular, they use Teams already, and they already connect often virtually. So it was very easy for us to do that. I sort of recruited widely on Twitter, now X, trying to use some jazzy visuals and novel people. And I did try and keep it to London and the South East, just because, to make it manageable. As it turns out, only Londoners replied. So that maybe is something to do with perhaps my influence, because I know them more, who knows. And then I collected the data, I recorded it on MS Teams, and that's an amazing way, because obviously it transcribes it automatically, not like my undergrad research where I was there transcribing for hours, much, much more easy. And I used a topic guide based very much on the data, based very much on my literature review, which was very, very limited, but there were links to sort of case management and some patient navigation type models that we see particularly in the States. So to do this, I use reflexive thematic analysis, which is Braun and Clark's model, and it's sort of very well evidenced to use when sort of thinking about topics that have very little information about them, and they're very much based on perceptions and experiences. It is a very, very structured model and can be really helpful when thinking about something new. But also that the use of this model means that it's a bit more robust. And some of the questions and the queries we have when it comes to qualitative study and the sort of slight, oh really, part of it, by having this really robust framework, it really helps sort of hopefully validate the data that we get at the end. So the first stage is that you familiarise yourself with the data, and I listened to it, I dog walked and I listened to it, I talked about it, I dreamt about it, I totally threw myself into the data. And I think what was fascinating was that, you need to do that. I mean, it's there very clearly in terms of data familiarisation. I could almost ad-lib, to sort of repeat it. And then you start thinking about coding. And Braun and Clark were historically very keen on lots of post-it notes and brightly coloured highlighters. I have a huge amount of data. And I ran 3 focus groups. I had 14 participants. The group went on for about 2 hours. It's a lot of data. So actually what I did was I used in vivo software, which is a QDAS quantity data analysis software program, which is heavenly. And not only does it allow for some coding, I don't know if I've put in my here we go. So what you can do is you can sort of highlight the areas of text. You can add in additional sort of codes or nodes as they are in vivo. And it enabled me to be very free in terms of how I was doing it. So I could write lots of different things. So for example, showed expertise, clinical experts, and then pull those together into categories. It's very visual. They've got lots of tools, for example, that lovely spider diagram that can really help me pull it all together. But actually, I am obviously an OT and a little bit creative, as we often are, and it was this that really helped. So I was having coffee one morning, and I just started doodling, and it suddenly all made sense. I thought, thank God, I now know where I'm going. And really the idea came from one of the analogies one of my participants said, and it was like this idea of navigating a ship and getting them through this really complex seas and the different ports and everything. That's where my brain went. So you've got the system of the sea, you've got individual currents that maybe they could be local currents or local priorities. It might be barriers that we're coming up against that maybe take you off as a patient, take you off somewhere else that you shouldn't be. So that was my creative bit, and that really helped me think about how I was going to develop my themes. So, sorry, I'm just going to go back there. So, yes. So anyway, so my findings were, and this was a nice, again, pictorial image, which I do like, I find it helpful. So I had 14 clinicians, one withdrew, so there were 15 originally. A really nice spread. nurses, speech therapists, OTs, occupational therapists and physios, which is actually pretty representative of the professions we see doing this role. They were all really experienced, on average 5 years of doing the role. They were senior clinicians, and they were all, and London, all of the London sectors were represented, which was great. So the sort of the three main themes I came across that came out of the study, if you like, was mapping the bigger picture. And this was this idea that as neuronavigators, one of the sort of special things that neuronavigators have is this view of the whole pathway. Going back to that first slide, they intervene, they're involved in from the moment somebody has, well, as soon as they're medically well enough to start talking about rehab, neuronavigators get involved there, and they often follow people all the way through that tangled web of services and structures to the end, which is ideally meaningful life, well-being, hopefully at home. So they work across different organisations, different providers, in different settings, and they often follow the patient journey all the way through. So understanding that complex mess of the system, but especially now in terms of the challenge system. So again, lack of staffing, the regional variation where you'll have some areas that have got ready access to rehab and other areas where they really don't have that ready access, and perhaps having to, for example, for level 2B, rehabilitation institute, you can be lucky with having a unit, but if you're in some of the neighbouring boroughs, that's sort of brokered by specialist nursing homes. They're not the same thing. So understanding that, being able to pull it together and articulate it, not just to the patient, but also to the clinicians. So that mapping the bigger picture, understanding the whole pathway, understanding the challenges within the system. And one of the most tricky bits is when neuronavigators get involved in money, because rehab costs, and there are very specific costs where we can cost save, so we maximise somebody, we optimise somebody's neuro rehab journey. Neuro rehab itself is incredibly expensive. If you don't get the right rehab and you continue to have highly complex needs, your lifelong care can be incredibly expensive. But as clinicians, and often as therapists and nurses, we don't like talking about money. We don't like to say, well, this rehab slow screen placement, whatever, will cost this much, and this is the other, this will cost this much, and you need to decide that. It's very uncomfortable. So that was a real area of conflict for neuronavigators, but really interesting, because that's not something that we think of. The next one was around charting the true course, and that was this idea of really holding the patient at the centre all the way through this complex web, understanding the mess, understanding the system, but making sure that not only is the journey for the patient best, but understanding that services are also challenged. So how do they advocate not only for the patient to get the best optimal rehab, but how do they support the services around the patient, as well as obviously their carers. One of the things I thought would come up was this idea of case management, is providing long-term support, but actually it did come up, but not nowhere nearly as strongly as I thought it would. But certainly this idea of it not being all about the money, and that we can't do it all. So we can't do everything as neuronavigators. We are constrained either by service specification or by influence in the system. And some neuronavigators had some really lovely examples of how they influence commissioners and influence systems to have better pathways. So I'm just going to whiz through these. So obviously in my currently being written up article, there are lots of lovely examples to support that, and this will hopefully be on web available for RNI later. So charting through, of course, we've got some really nice examples. In an ideal world, it would be lovely if the family just had one person, but I can't do it and I feel too much pressure. That gives a really nice. One of the biggest things was the fact that neuronavigators are clearly gap filling. They're morphing what they do to fill the needs, so we all do it slightly differently. And when it comes to defining the role, which I thought we might be able to get to, or at least go along towards that, it became more and more aware that what we did was based on what the system that we were working in and how we did it. But there was some freedom, and there was definitely this feeling that we needed to be challenging, we needed to have some freedom to question and to do things differently, and that felt really important. But we also had the clinical expertise, very key, in terms of being trusted by the wider system to challenge and navigate. So I'm just going to whiz through. So when we think about what neuronavigators are, I very much sort of, in my discussion, talked about us being champions of neuro rehab. And when we think about champions in complex care or complex sectors, these personal attributes come through. So persuasion, ownership and presence, grit, leadership and influence. And they are very clearly identified in the data as very key things that neuronavigators do. But what makes neuronavigation more important and sort of pulls together those themes is that actually neuronavigators are system influencers. So they influence the pathway for the individual, they influence local services in terms of getting the right people in, but also understanding what's needed, and also an increasing influence to commissioning and NHS-wide system level changes. And I think that felt really, it's a much bigger role than we initially thought. So, strengths-wise, it's the first study in the area. It was, we've got really fantastic regional representation for London. There are 22 now, 3 new roles since I did this piece of research. But we've got 14 out of the 20 as there were then. Neuronavigators talking pretty good in terms of representation. Everybody was very engaged, and like I say, I had to close the focus groups down. We could have carried on talking, so it had some really strong information power. The framework I use for thematic analysis is very robust, and certainly when we think about how we can make the data as relevant and representational as possible, having a good framework, and also thinking about where it sits in the current state, in other research areas, where the literature is. It's as robust as it can be, and it was certainly very relevant and very useful, and I've used this research in a number of different forums already, which is really helpful. There were some technical challenges, as there often are, when it comes to things like using Teams. There was some very loud lawnmower action in one of them, which seemed to sort of kibosh the recordings a little bit for a brief period of time. But on the whole, it was felt to be overcome. I certainly was able to rewatch the video and listen to the audio enough times. It is London-centric, but like I say, had pretty good information power for London. London in itself obviously has its own very specific socioeconomic challenges and system challenges, but bearing in mind this is the first piece of research, so I'm sure it's relevant elsewhere, at least to be taken into account. And I didn't address some of the other issues around gender diversity within neuronavigation. And I suppose critically, it was just me. It was me and my research supervisor, so there was no triangulation. I did try and I did a reflexive diary and that sort of thing to really understand my role and my expectations and my thoughts about it, especially being a neuronavigator in London. So my advice. So why it's particularly relevant is that out of this has come a sort of a core roles and responsibilities. So not only has it been something that was really helpful and the neuronavigators involved found it really valuable to sort of really sit down and talk about what they do, and then for it to be analysed externally almost and pulled together. They found that really helpful. But actually what it's enabled us to do is to say this is what neuronavigation is from our perspective. And in North East London in particular, we've used this and some other work to look at developing core roles and responsibilities as a neuronavigation model across North East London. There is some regional variation within the different places, there has to be. That's very much like a gap fill aside, like a gap fill element. But it is actually being utilised, which is wonderful. We need a lot more. We need to understand what are the perspectives from the rehab units, from our patients and our carers. But this is a really lovely start. Lovely. So there we go. I think that's probably right. Time one. Lovely.
Excellent talk. Your energy literally inspire all of us. And excellent timekeeping. Thank you. Now, questions.
Just for lunch.
While they are planning for questions, my question is, in all these kind of things, we always like to hear what the real patients or families like to hear, or what any comments on that? The real patient involvement of the family.
Absolutely. So this was a master's dissertation, so I was somewhat time limited, so I very much focused on, as a first step, what do we think we are? And how do we think? The next step, absolutely, is understanding what our patients and their carers and the families and our other wider stakeholders also understanding the navigation to be.
You learned most of the things of qualitative analysis. That's your next step for PhD.
Yes, we shall see.
Kristen.
It's really interesting because I heard you speak halfway through your.
That's right. Yes, and I just come up with
and your outcomes. Do you see this bringing about change to neuronavigation?
I think it has already. I think in a way, just by us all sitting together and really having a talk about it, I think it really helped validate everybody's role. And I think to help everybody understand the variety of the role that we do. So in City and Hackney particularly, we have this incredibly extended model where we support people from the very beginning, all the way through long-term potentially, if they have ongoing either rehab needs or particular complexities. Whereas in other areas of London, maybe perhaps just provide very much the front bit, maybe sort of focusing on flow through hospital. We do flow, but we also look at policy outcomes. So I think that validation has been really helpful. And like I say, actually, the direct implementation within North East London has been to really enable us to nut down some core roles and responsibilities that have now been agreed across the region, with an awareness that there's also some additional local variation, should I say.
And yes.
How does it work? I thought it was fascinating, really fascinating, especially from a patient's point of view to have that support. It's so valuable. But where do you sit? Do you sit in the hospital or in community care? Where do you sit?
It depends. So some neuronavs sit in in like ICB, sit with the ICB, some sit within continuing healthcare. The majority, and I recommended model, would be that you sit in the community rehab team. And the reason that you do that is because actually you need to be able to go into the Royal London and see somebody when they're just medically stable, having been helicoptered there, and you need to be able to then understand your local context really well. You need to know your local rehab units, you need to understand your community teams and how best to support that person. And I think therefore in the community, I would always say that actually in the community setting you've got that slight distance to be able to scope the whole lot, so from the acute, secondary, and then out into the community. And obviously, unlike many areas, there's a real interface with private organisations like specialist nursing homes.
How do you communicate and sort of get the information across to those?
Communication is absolutely one of the absolute sort of nuggets of neuronavigation. So it's patient-centred, so it's very much about following the patient through. So Mrs. Jones gets referred in from Royal London and we say, I'm Catherine, I'm your neuronavigator. Mrs. Jones and family, I'm your neuronavigator. Everybody else, I'm their neuronavigator, and we follow them through. So it's one person. And so much evidence around that value of having a single point of contact. And that, and I suppose we aim to oil the wheels a little bit. And there's definitely some real benefits of working regionally and locally, because you get to know everybody's the easiest way to getting people in and out of places. We're about to launch an idea of where we're providing some minimal cross cover, because often these are solitary posts, so there's a neuronavigator for Waltham Forest, we've got a job share sitting in Hackney, a single person in Tower Hamlets. So obviously if you go off on holiday for 2 weeks, or you're poorly, it sort of can leave acute hospital really struggling, particularly at that front end where obviously they're under real pressure to get everybody through. So yeah, so that's one of the things that's come out of this. Thanks, Wilson.
Okay, that has been
Sorry, I
very
didn't-
fine. No, not at all. Thank you, everyone.
So, this afternoon we've got 3 interesting speakers. The first is one of my colleagues from, she's actually from Royal Free Hospital. She's one of the infectious disease consultants there. But she wears many hats. She works in many think tanks in London. She's part of NHS England, and her real interest is in improving patient outcomes. Right now, she is Senior Clinical Advisor at NHS England on health equity and policy. And that is the topic she's going to be talking to us about today. So I welcome you, Dr. Eva, please.
Hi everybody, thank you very much. I'm just going to try and share my slides to see if this works. Sorry about all the tech. Oh, okay, great. Okay. So hi everybody. So as Hamza said, I work in the Royal Free Hospital half of the week in acute medicine and infectious diseases, and the other half of the week I work in NHS England in the National Healthcare Inequalities Improvement Programme. So my life is sort of a constant question of how we can get, the policy aspirations into real life in the hospital and in the healthcare systems. So I'm going to talk to you today about innovation and Core 20+5 and what that all really means. And so to start off, I would just like to emphasize that our vision in our team is really that we should provide exceptional quality healthcare for all. And that's really the all, including all the inclusion health groups and people experiencing inequalities, people from communities that are deprived, and people from minority ethnic communities. And we really feel that this is important to achieve through equitable access. And this equitable access is what we're still struggling with in the NHS. And we're still living out the inverse care law, where people who need healthcare the most are the people who are the least likely to receive it. And so this is our huge number one priority, is to really deliver the healthcare people need equitably. But also to focus on the experience of healthcare, because we know experiences of healthcare actually shape health outcomes. So experiencing microaggressions and racism and stigma really shapes your outcomes and shortens your life. And not only that, but it will also affect your future health seeking behavior of your friends and family around you. And so these 2 areas we feel are really, really important to actually narrow the gap in healthcare inequalities and achieve optimal outcomes. So moving on to our Core 20+5 ecosystem. And so the Core 20+5 team has been set up in the last sort of 2.5 years. And what we're really trying to do is make sure that the national context is exactly right and exactly supportive to address healthcare inequalities at a local integrated care system level. And so this infographic represents the support offers that we are currently delivering, and this is constantly changing. And so this is sort of the most up-to-date version. I'd like to just talk about the Core 20+ accelerator sites first, and these are the sites you can see on the right of the image. And so there's one accelerator site in every single region of England, and we have funded them to do a very sort of fast-paced delivery of the Core 20+5 framework. And what they're obliged to do is sort of feed back to us in real time and very accurately what the real world implications are of trying to address healthcare inequalities through this Core 20+5 lens. And the findings that they're bringing through after a year of trying to work with communities are really important. So what they're telling us and what we're seeing from the early evaluation is that there's an immense need for trust and trust building. And trust building takes a lot of time. And the first step is usually to recognize the past injustices and past interventions that haven't worked. and then to build from there. So the second message is really about co-production, making sure that we're designing and delivering healthcare services that people need and want. And then the final measure is, the final challenge really is, how do we measure success quickly enough for our funders and our finance leads to justify sustaining the investment in the work. And so those are three main messages, and I think they really very much apply to innovation in healthcare inequalities as well. And on the bottom right, you can see the 420 plus ambassadors, and these are everyday managers and clinicians working in the NHS who are really, going above and beyond addressing healthcare inequalities. And we recognise their efforts with the 420 plus ambassadors program. So this is the expert peer reference group of over 300 ambassadors all around the country. And so we train them in healthcare inequalities improvement and in leadership. And we also network them with the national teams and with all the other ICSs around the country. I'm really delighted to say that some of these are actually finance fellows. So we have kind of almost like a complete health system training up in addressing healthcare inequalities. And on the bottom left, you'll see the Core 20 Plus Collaborative. And I sort of like to see this almost like a cruise ship. So this is sort of it's like a council of elders or kind of a national steering group of all the sort of national bodies, the academic institutions, the training bodies and the regulators, all coming together to try and make sure that addressing healthcare inequalities is very coherent nationally. And so this is really to try and make sure that we're all working together in a very focused and targeted approach to address healthcare inequalities. We have the Core 20 Plus Connectors, who are community champions who are funded through the NHS and working with charities and voluntary sector organisations to really be the voice of the people and also to make people aware of their rights and of what's available to them through the NHS. And then finally, we have the Core 20 Plus Innovation, which I'll talk through now. So I just wanted to start with raising the sort of question, how can innovation address healthcare inequalities? And some of my reflections are based on the work we've been doing over the last year and a half with the Innovation Research and Life Science Department in the NHS England. And we spent a lot of time debating what the definition of innovation is and whether something is innovative or is just a slow adoption. And so I think we've come up with this framework for innovation that addresses health inequities. And I just want to really emphasize that it's important that the innovation is new to that particular community. I think the time frame since it was launched as an innovation is less important for what we're trying to do here. But we also want to emphasize that innovation is not just about a new product or a new tech or a new app. Innovative approaches are also included under the umbrella of innovation. And often it's about the diversity of the people that we're supporting to be innovators. It's about how we give out grants, how we appraise for grants. It's about what questions we're answering in the research and then what products are coming down the line. And I think the really kind of starting example is around sickle cell, when we compare drug delivery and drug development in sickle cell versus drug delivery and development in cystic fibrosis. And we can see two very similar and very debilitating diseases that affect very different demographics of people. And the investment and the speed of working through the product pipelines is markedly different. So we saw no new drugs for sickle cell in 20 to 30 years until very recently, whereas we've had numerous drugs come out in cystic fibrosis. And so what I'm trying to say is that we're not trying to slow down innovation in any area. We're trying to help accelerate innovation in the areas that have been impacted by inequalities along the way. So the Core 20 Plus 5 framework is how we're proposing to address healthcare inequalities at a national level. So these are the national strategic priorities for addressing healthcare inequalities in England. And so these are written into all the board papers at NHS England. They're written into the planning guidance, which is the sort of the legally binding contract that the NHS has every year to provide care. And they're also written into the Health and Care Act 2022. And so this is really just to emphasize the kind of policy background, policy context that is in place now to support us all to address healthcare inequalities. And so the challenge now is to bring all this to life. And so the core 20 population is the 20% that are most deprived, and that's defined by the index of multiple deprivation. And I just would like to point out that the index of multiple deprivation is made up of several domains, and one of which is health. But there are other areas such as knife-crime education, housing, and job security that impact on the index, but aren't really under the influence of the NHS. So I just wanted to emphasise that this work and the Core 20+5 framework is really for addressing healthcare inequalities, not broader, wider determinants of health. And we fully support the agenda, obviously, to address societal inequality, but we have such potential within the NHS to actually really save lives and lengthen lives and improve healthy lives. And so this framework is really to drive that forward. The plus group is also the target population, and these are the people who share protected characteristics that are at risk of or are already experiencing healthcare inequalities. And these are determined locally, but there's some national guidance on who should be included in this group. So we've got the 5 key clinical areas, and you can see across a lot of those: maternity care, mental illness, respiratory disease, early cancer diagnosis, and hypertension case finding. And these are the 5 areas of focus for now, because these are the areas of illness where the gap is widest between most and least deprived, or between the plus groups and the general population. And our aspirations are that these 5 will eventually be addressed and then replaced by 5 more. But these are here to really focus our efforts on healthcare inequalities improvement, because we know that healthcare inequalities are very pervasive through the decades and even centuries in England. And I mentioned about access to care, and I just wanted to show this analysis that we did of every single prescription that was written in routine care in the NHS in England. And what we found, we looked at the differences in prescribing patterns between the core 20 population and the non-core 20 population. And what we found was that there was reduced uptake of exemptions, so prescription exemptions, in the core 20 population. But also, more worryingly perhaps, there was a difference in prescribing patterns in the core 20 population. So we saw more old-fashioned medicines, we saw more medicines that were on the nice do not prescribe or less preferred drug list. And we also saw that there was lots of use of short-acting drugs that do not necessarily have an impact on longer-term outcomes. For example, very short-acting old-fashioned antipsychotics, or indeed salbutamol inhalers. And the levels of prescribing of these drugs are actually very clearly associated in the literature with very adverse outcomes. So, for example, in the short-acting bronchodilators, we know that that's the overuse of more than 1 a month is associated with serious arrhythmia. And so these inequalities and themes that are coming out of these analyses are so important for us to use to drive action. And the way we can drive action has to be innovative, because business as usual isn't working so far. This is the Core 20+5 framework for children and young people, and so the target population is the same as in the adults. But in the children, the 5 key clinical areas are different. And we know that inequalities in childhood actually have a much kind of more societal level of influence and opportunity. And so we recognise that some of these are much more about public health and education. But there are overlaps, so we are looking at respiratory disease in terms of asthma and diabetes. We're seeing terrible inequalities in access to the most up-to-date medicines and pumps in deprived quintiles, and also in ethnic and minority communities. And so this is something we're really urgently trying to address. And then also in terms of treatment of epilepsy and access to specialist services, it's very unequal for people living with learning disability or autism. The oral health one always makes me feel really sad, because we're seeing children with teeth so rotten that they have to be removed through having an operation and a general anesthetic. And the number one reason a child will have a general anaesthetic in this country in 2024 is to have their teeth removed due to dental decay. And this is entirely preventable and has massive implications for diet, for eating, for speech, for confidence, for psychological health. And so the House is there as a major national priority. And then the mental health of children has been very, very severely impacted through COVID, and so this is another huge priority area. We did a prescribing analysis in childhood prescribing and uptake of exemptions as well, and lo and behold, we saw a very similar pattern of reduced uptake of exemptions, but also less preferred drugs were being prescribed for children of the core 20 population. So this is perhaps kind of unearthing these kind of ingrained biases that we were carrying around in the NHS and that are really playing out to cause adverse outcomes for the patients who use the NHS. And so we've got a special screening report looking at patient safety and health inequalities. And actually, when we've gone to examine the National Confidential Inquiry into Patient Outcomes and Deaths and done a thematic analysis of inequalities, we found that actually almost every single patient safety incident in the NHS is related to something to do with healthcare inequality. So we're really proposing this kind of approach of looking at co-production, looking at communication barriers, looking at the systems and how there's these biases and diagnostic overcrowding, and then also kind of access to healthcare and how we can really urgently improve patient safety. So we've developed a report on what needs to be done to improve patient safety, and I'm told it will be published imminently, although it's with our comms department, but I'll be sure to share it with you all when it is published. But I just wanted to draw your attention to this example of an innovation that I just thought was just so brilliant, and the fact that it's just so obvious and so straightforward and hasn't been done before kind of really emphasizes what I'm trying to get at here, is that we can be innovators in day-to-day NHS care, and it's actually worth doing because sometimes some of the most obvious things haven't even been set up. So this is a brilliant intervention where a pharmacist who is from the minority ethnic community noticed that his mother who English is her second language, she was really struggling to read her pharmacy labels for her medications. And so he designed a program that actually can translate the pharmacy label into over 40 languages. And so that's in the pharmacy, that's kind of printing out these multilingual labels that are put directly onto the tablet bottles. And so that he's starting to get evidence to show that this is really, really helping with patient safety around medication safety. And I think what's really great is that he's developing some infographics that are sort of multilingual, and so it's kind of a project that has just loads of opportunity. And so we're really trying to make this something that's used across the whole of the NHS. But I guess that's the kind of other area where we have to innovate, is how to scale and spread. I mentioned sickle cell, and this is one of our kind of areas of focus, and certainly the head of the NHS is also really motivated, Amanda Pritchard, to address healthcare inequalities in sickle cell disease. And we know that the experience of care is really poor in sickle cell. There's a lot of stigma. Pain in sickle cell is actually not only a symptom, but it's actually a cause of worsening of the disease. So we know when people are in pain, they produce more oxygen-free radicals and more lactic acid, and then this causes further crisis of the sickling. And so we know that people aren't treated enough when they're in pain with sickle cell, and they're often labelled as drug seekers. And so we have some really disturbing accounts of how painful it is and how poor the experience is having to go to hospital for sickle cell. And so these are some of our very explicit interventions. And there is a new drug that is very innovative and reduces the crises in sickle cell disease, and we're delighted to have launched that in the last year. And so there's further recommendations on patient healthcare inequalities and patient safety. And these are mainly around trying to really engage the families and the communities, and really have a sort of a person-centered approach. focus. And this is just another case study I really wanted to draw your attention to on just how important it is around medication safety and prescribing, and also listening to the families. And so poor Oliver McGowan died as a teenager, sort of accessing healthcare due to the side effects of medications that he was prescribed. So he was prescribed some antipsychotic medication, despite the families sort of protesting and saying that they knew him so well. He did have learning disability, but they didn't believe he was psychotic. But the family very sadly weren't listened to. And he died, and now his mother is kind of a lifelong campaigner for really really kind of recognising the family's role, especially when patients are dependent on their families for care and for advocacy. And so there's mandatory training from the NHS, which is the Oliver McGowan training. So we talked through the sort of different innovative approaches, whether that's health tech or whether that's a process of care or whether that's a way of engaging with the community, or whether it's drug delivery and development. But there's also sort of an emerging equitable innovation ecosystem across the NHS. And I know you're going to hear from Tony Young later on about the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. But I just wanted to mention the Innovation for Healthcare Inequalities Programme. So we funded 39 projects across 38 of the 42 ICSs around the whole of England with 3.9 million. And their task was to rapidly deliver innovation to a community that was living with inequalities, and it had to be a NICE approved innovation. And actually now we're seeing the early successes of this work, and the evaluation is showing that it was extremely successful, but took a long time to really develop the sort of levels of trust that we needed. So what we're finding is that sometimes when innovations are brought directly to communities of inequalities, there's a lot of stigma and a lot of distrust and a lot of people feeling like they're being treated as guinea pigs for drug companies to kind of test out new drugs. So there's a lot of work around the narrative and around explaining why we are addressing healthcare inequalities first before the rest of the general population. But really we see that as sort of part of the journey and part of the building of the trust. The NHS Innovation Accelerator, we're delighted to be partnered with them and the Race and Health Observatory to have 2 fellows fully funded to do innovation targeted at inequalities. And so John James and Steve Barnett are the 2 fellows that we selected for successful this year. And John James is the Chief Exec of the Sickle Cell Society, so they're doing really great work on community engagement and advocacy. And Steve Barnett, he works in sort of an AI company where they're doing very sophisticated prioritising of the elective care recovery waiting lists, trying to prioritise not just on clinical priorities, but also on the protected characteristics and risk of inequalities. And this is just to mention that we love working with Tony on the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, and he's going to talk to you all about that later on, so I'm not going to go into that. And I just wanted to mention the Small Business Research Initiative. So this is really about trying to get the kind of future Steve Jobs of the world in healthcare innovations really funded and supported, and give them a platform to really address healthcare inequalities through entrepreneurship and through business research. And so there's lots of grants and funding and opportunities available through that. So I've talked you through the sort of various different lenses of innovation in healthcare. And I think I just wanted to say that sometimes it's about what we measure as a success that is the sort of making or breaking of this work. And so I think it's very important when you're doing innovation in healthcare and inequalities to really address what you're measuring. So you're measuring very strict outcomes and that, but the knock-on benefits that we have seen in the IMPIT program, for example, have been driving up registration as GPs, getting people out and about, getting people to join peer support groups, and getting people conscious of their cardiovascular fitness and not just their blood pressure. So there's quite a layers and layers of benefits that really making sure people understand that we're here to stay, we're here to address inequalities, and we're really committed for the long term. And so in a way we have to sort of protect these projects from having the funding pulled later on. So I think the onus is on us to kind of be able to demonstrate the return on investment, and I think that's the biggest challenge we're facing at the moment. So please do get in touch, sorry, these are the sort of generic NHS England contact, but I'd be delighted for my contact details to be shared, and do get in touch if you want to explore opportunities or chat about a project or become an ambassador or a fellow, and we'd be delighted to have you.
So, do you have any questions from the audience? So while they're thinking, Eva, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you. That was a brilliant talk. I was really, really impressed with the work that NHS England is doing. How you've got so many fingers in so many pies. What I'm really interested in is how do your ambassadors act? How do they balance out inequalities, and how do they make it work?
That's a really good question, and I think it's kind of the story of our times, isn't it? That a lot of this work is like running on benevolence and energy and kind of commitment. So the ambassadors are not in a paid role with us. So we're recognising their kind of current work addressing healthcare inequalities, and then they benefit from having a sort of a platform to link up with all the national teams and national leaders. And then they're supported to sort of deliver a project, but it's usually a project that they're already doing as part of their everyday work in the NHS. Yeah.
I see. So you basically support them with an idea that they've already had to try and get through the goalposts and try and improve the quality.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And brilliant. And I presume you're getting some success stories. Do you mind telling us about the success stories?
Yes, definitely. We're getting some really, really great success stories coming through. And so, for example, one of our ambassadors, Sylvie Clark, is a biochemist, and so she designed a little test tube that can be used to have blood taken at home. And so she has done a massive project in her ICS where all patients with muscular diseases or neurological diseases where their mobility is reduced, they can do their bloods by post without having to come into the hospital. And so she set all this up through the sort of normal biochemistry commissioning pathways, and managed to actually really improve the lives of a lot of people with the neurological disabilities. And we have another ambassador who's a primary care manager, and he set up a sort of a community awareness group about the differences between Arab populations and Southeast Asian populations, and they managed to sort of convince the primary care team and providers to provide a kind of tailored, culturally appropriate package of care to the different communities. And another group who managed to really drive down this sort of undiagnosed hypertension in their primary care community in Lambeth, in Black African communities. And what they did was they partnered with barbershops. And so, ended up kind of checking blood pressure, having a chat about blood pressure, and then kind of linking into the GP after that. So sometimes it's about kind of thinking outside the box and thinking of who provides healthcare in an innovative way.
And so you're in a brilliant position because you sit at sort of the top. I hate saying that, you're at a top-down level, so you look at the top. How do you take something from Lambeth and apply it to, say, I don't know, central Manchester or to Birmingham? How do you move that across so you can really garner the adoption and move things forward?
I think that is the sort of golden question of our time. How do you scale and spread at pace across the country? And so I think, things like the Ambassadors Programme, not only are they doing sort of very individual projects, but they come together very regularly on a regional and national basis. So they're great sort of energetic people who will take a project and bring it to life. But I think as well, what we're seeing with all the new policy frameworks, the legal frameworks, the contractual obligations, is that there's a real onus on ICBs, or integrated care boards, to be accountable to addressing healthcare inequalities. So I think that's sort of the routine to make it like normal business as usual.
Brilliant. We have a question from the floor. Mrs.
Hi, my name is Anita Sweet, I'm a consultant surgeon. Are you looking into essentially a screening test? Because there is a serious inequality of all screening tests across the country.
Did you get that, Eva? Should I repeat it?
Maybe please, yeah.
Yeah, so she's tell you, she's a colorectal surgeon, Mrs. T. Again, she's interested in uptake of screening, so particularly for, I presume, in her case, colorectal cancer, but obviously beyond that, various specialties. Have you looked into that? Something that NHS England is thinking about?
That's a really great question. So we definitely have the sort of screening and immunisation team in NHS England, and they're really kind of focusing in on healthcare inequalities. And so, for example, in immunisation, before COVID, we didn't look at inequalities with the vaccination uptake. We just looked at sort of numbers. And now there's an obligation to really start to understand what are the inequalities in flu vaccine, what are the inequalities in HPV vaccine. But in screening, it's a very similar approach, and COVID has really kind of jolted everything into action. And so we know, say, for example, in breast screening, there was a huge population that were completely missed for screening breast cancer, and we're seeing them then come through as sadly as actual established breast cancer. But these are in populations with inequalities, and some of it is due to the postal system, the way notifications are sent out. So there's a whole big kind of piece of work looking at that. But specifically for colorectal cancer, and one of our INHIP teams did a project on FIT testing, so the fecal immunochemical test for looking for blood in the intervals, which might be a sign of colorectal cancer. And they managed to deliver 30,000 FIT tests by post to communities with inequalities. And what they were trying to do was really demonstrate that a NICE approved technology could be sort of rolled out rapidly and targeted at inequalities successfully. And they've certainly proven that. And so the sort of next step is, like, as you just asked, Hamza, like, how do we scale and spread that to a national level? And but certainly there's intense interest in that. And if you want to get in touch with me, please do, and I can link you in with those people who did that project.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I'll be interested, thank you. Any other questions from the floor? Yeah, please.
You mentioned about the COVID. I'm Narendra, one of the neonatal consultant. In the adult medicine, during the COVID, we realized that saturation monitoring compared to Caucasians or non-Caucasians, there is a difference in how much it picks up. If one wants to look at the similar thing in the neonatal population, newborns are preterm infants, will you be able to help us?
Yeah, of course. So there's a bit to carry over. So Prof. Narendra is a neonatologist. He said that during the COVID times, they noticed difference in monitoring of oxygen saturation between Caucasian and non-Caucasian communities. Now he's thinking about applying a similar methodology to sort of the neonatal population. Is that something you could help him out with?
Absolutely. So great question. And yes, that was a really disturbing kind of discovery during COVID about how we measured oxygen saturations depending on how much pigment in the skin that influenced the reading of the oxygen in the blood. And certainly, I'm sure, theoretically, that would be also a situation in newborns. And I do know there was one of the clinical entrepreneurs that was working on an ear probe for measuring oxygen saturation through the eardrum, and so I can certainly put you in touch with them. But also I'm thinking it would be very worth your while getting in touch with the current review of the safety of medical devices and inequalities that's just opened the last day or two, because that would be a very, very important area of interest. And then, I'm sorry, if you just get in touch, I will link you up with all these people. But Habib Knaffi, who is the chief exec of the Race and Health Observatory, is very, very interested in the devices and oxygen saturation. They've done a sort of big review of adult care, so that might be something they would be interested in pursuing with you.
Could you just mention that I've written to the Health Observatory, NHS Health Observatory, It's done 6 weeks, I haven't heard anything
So
from
he's
them.
already contacted the health observatory. Could you give them a push?
6 or 7 weeks now. Thank you, thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? No? Brilliant. Thank you so much, Eva. Thank you. Thanks so much. We need to catch up properly. Okay. So thank you very much. Caroline, please come and join us. Caroline is Homerton's very own speech and language therapist, and today she's representing us as an innovator.
I'm coming to a new government, but I'm an NHS entrepreneur, and I'm the co-founder of Verbo. I just wanted to talk through mine and Verbo's innovation journey, but just start with, I don't like the word, but it's a problem, the challenge that we face in children's speech and language therapy. So approximately 1.9 million children and young people have speech, language and communication needs. And here you can see some of the impacts that this can have on their life outcomes, such as academic attainment, employment prospects, mental health. And this is affecting 2 to 3 children in every single household, and that's quite a lot of children. And before I go into speaking about Verbo and our journey, I just wanted to set the scene and us to just think and consider one of the many possible journeys this could have for a child. So for a child who struggles to talk and understand words, so many aspects of their life are impacted. And if we have a think about, just the impact this can have as they navigate their way through childhood into adulthood, and then the knock-on effect that can have in adulthood as well. And then just down here in this table, we know that this also comes at a cost, a societal cost to local communities, as many of these children need additional support, additional referrals, additional funding. But actually, our thinking as we started thinking about Verbo was, with help, we can change this trajectory. Alongside all of that, we also know there's a crisis in special educational needs and disabilities. So local authorities are struggling to meet the growing needs of local communities, resulting in massive budget deficits. This means that schools don't always have the access to the support they need. Their budgets are limited. There's also a high turnover of speech and language therapists and staff in schools. For speech and language therapy services, we're lucky in that we've got a service, we've got a service in schools, we've got a service in the community, but it's still not enough. And also in many areas of the country, these services are really limited. So they might only be able to provide statutory services, they might have assessment only, they might do single reports. What therapists are struggling to do is prioritise preventative and targeted care that can make a difference pre-referral. So what we have is supply versus demand imbalance in speech and language therapy support. So that's the challenge, that's the problem we're facing. And this, we've all chosen different images. Mine's a wiggly line with peaks and troughs for my journey. But just to think about from idea to innovation, so it was back in late 2020, the COVID year, I got a place on the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme and the Verbo journey began. I'll let Tony talk about the programme, but just for anyone who doesn't know about it, it's an amazing programme. It provides information, advice, mentors. I sort of felt like I found my people who was on the programme. Like they talk about finding your tribe, and you had people, you might have a clinical idea, but you've got people to fill in the gaps for you, to support you along the way. It's kind of a really safe environment. And trying not to focus on the negative things that happened during COVID. I was inspired by, when I started the programme, I went there inspired by some of the successes we've had, particularly going online. We work in schools, so schools shut their doors to us. We couldn't go in for quite some time, which was challenging. Children with speech and language difficulties, they're harder to engage online. But some online things work, especially working with professionals. I went on the programme, first of all, my first idea was, why don't we, I don't know if this is the word, delocalise or centralise, I didn't really know which word to go for, speech and language services. So as people were leaving our service, therapists, well, they could live anywhere, and we could provide online services. But actually, as I began to think about that more, that didn't really match with the recruitment crisis we were facing. It wasn't a long-term sustainable thing. It would plug a short-term gap. And I started to think, could technology make a difference? I was listening to lots of people talk about software and technology, and started to think about the idea of a web-based app, and whether that could build efficiencies for us in speech and language care. Whilst on the entrepreneur program, I met Dr. Michael Watts, so he's the CEO of Bloom Health. He gave a talk at the program. He's also an entrepreneur. He's developed a health tech company, and he's an NHS doctor as well. And I started chatting with him about the idea of a web-based app, and he wanted to go. Like that could plug a gap. We had something there that could work. And then so fast forward to January 2022. On the entrepreneur program, I learned about grants. I didn't know anything about grants before then. I applied for an NIHR grant. I had never seen so much money on a piece of paper, so that was great. We got the grant, and so we collaborated with Bloom Health. They became our tech partners. We got a small team of therapists together in Hackney. What we were really conscious of, we didn't want to take away from the care of the children and young people in Hackney. So as COVID happened, quite a few of our team actually moved away. I think that happened for lots of people. People moved out of London, and we were able to retain them, or people when they were reducing their clinical hours for parenting responsibilities or whatever, we were able to retain them and they could work remotely. We set out to co-design this software. We did it with users, so we worked with schools and settings, listening to them, really thinking about what they needed, what could make a difference. I think the thing I just mentioned, we also down here, the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, NIHR, they were our first grants, I always say them, we were also really fortunate. It was about 200K, wasn't it? And then since then, to our journey, we've had another about 250K from Knowledge Assets Grant Fund, a brilliant grant fund, who have supported us along our way. And that they really enabled us to listen to the feedback of our users, build our content, change the technology, and more recently focus on our marketing so we can be successful. But this, I couldn't put enough blogs onto the page, but to just think, do you know how to summarise the journey? It's been a whirlwind. Anyone Martinez and from our team, it's been an absolute whirlwind, and I think that wave line represents it. As a clinician, I have been massively thrown out of my comfort zone, which is good, you know, that's fun. And I've been in the world of, developing a brand. I'm a sick person, I'm developing some sort of branding, thinking about content, working with a videographer, the amount of effort that goes into that, technical design, so co-designing with users, translating our clinical vision to the technical team. Still today, that we continually work on that. Side of safety, our favourite down here, Chrissy also say is legal. I've had a lot of sleepless nights about data protection and contracts. But what we did was we started this design, and then in the summer 2022, before it launched to market, we did a pilot study. So we had some pilot schools across London and the rest of the UK, and they were able to pilot the pilot platform, use it with some children, provide us with feedback, and it wasn't enough time to see progress, massive progress with children, because children with speech and language needs need time, but we were able to see that it was having an impact and effectiveness on people's practice. So then it was about October 2022, and we went to our first conference. And at that point, this is what the platform looked like. This is what the platform looked like today through all our reflection and building. So the platform provides education staff with instant access to environment audits, bite-sized staff training, screening tools for pupils, which generate personalised targets, which links to content, so the content library with video-based modelling and downloading resources. There's data reporting, so you can see all your impact measures. You can add a parent or carer. If a pupil's over 16, they can have a login as well and do some self-assessment. And there's impact recording. But the build really is an iterative process. We're constantly changing and adapting things. So even right at the beginning, when we first built it, we intended for schools just to use this. And within less than a week, it became apparent that actually local authorities, speech and language teams, ICBs wanted this to distribute. So I'm going to say quickly, not quickly, the tech team tweaked the tech. So we had another hierarchy of access so that we could be distributed across regional areas, which was way more than I'd ever imagined. But I think now our mission really is to educate, to empower education staff to enhance the communication skills of all children. So we want to have a one-stop shop that's providing preventative care that can benefit all children, and then some more bespoke care for some, all without having to wait. So there's massive waiting lists across the country. And this is also in line with the government agenda. Anyone who works in education is something called the graduated response, which is encouraging schools to put planning review cycles, essentially put things in place before asking for additional funding. But that's tough for schools. If they don't have the tools to do that, that's really hard. And then they wait for, they can't make the referral, they have to wait for referral. So this is giving them some of the tools to be able to do that. The other feedback we've had is, the whole team around the child can get involved on the platform, and they can be upskilled in supporting communication. And we know that that doesn't happen in isolation. To get impact, the more people that know about it, the more people with the child, the better, whether that's in education, in health, at home. And instant access technology allows that. I just wrote down here, I logged on the other day, just since this September, so this academic year, 9,500, actually, Lauren, our assistant, told me it's over 10,000 now, she could check this morning, because she wrote another presentation. 10,000 pieces of content have been accessed, that's massive. These are the staff that wouldn't have otherwise had access to that. And what is learned to support one child can help many. It doesn't just help that one child. If you learn a skill, if you watch a video about using pictures to help communication, that's going to help every child that you work with. And the other thing about a digital platform, right, it can be accessed anywhere. It can be accessed as many times as you want. We're lucky in Hackney, we're often in schools every week, every fortnight, but in some places it's months that you wait. So you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for someone to reply to that email, send you a link. You can just keep watching that piece of content, and you could share the advice without waiting. We have around 4,000, just over 4,000 staff active in the platform, so that just shows how many people are benefiting from the content so far. And there's no limits, you can have as many people, you can have as many parents, carers, family members, staff as you want. So the whole team really can benefit. And when you add a parent, they can see pupils, they can see their child's targets, they can watch the videos, so they can either just get information so they know what's happening, or they can practice and play the game. So a lot of the video therapists playing games with children, talking about what it helps with, so they can see those and play the games at home as well. For speech and language therapists, this is also a tool that supports them. It can free up their limited time to focus on the children who require support, the direct support that only they can deliver. And it can provide a toolkit. The other thing it does is, it's a toolkit of ready-to-go resources. So if you're recommending something that's on Verbo, you don't need to use your time to model that. You can just give someone the link to the video and then say, I'll come back later when you've done that as well. In turn, this is going to help reduce waiting times. It's going to support with better quality referrals. So feedback we're getting so far is that schools are better able to identify those children who need support. So it might not reduce referrals, but there'll be better quality referrals because people will have tried doing some things. And it will hopefully reduce unnecessary referrals, both for speech and language therapy, but also for other services when children get misidentified, and funding as well. So in education, those of you who work with children, you can apply for an EHCP, which is statutory funding that supports education, and maybe it can have an impact on that. Another thing about technology is it breaks down geographical boundaries. So, I mean, since January 2022, I never imagined this. We've rolled out, it's amazing. We've been championed by local authorities, ICBs, individual schools all across the UK. The other thing that we were talking about the other day, Christine, wasn't it, that this, it also reduces carbon emissions. I actually sort of hadn't thought, I was speaking to some therapists who work in North Yorkshire. We travel miles to go, I don't know, that doesn't cross my mind exactly when I'm walking or cycling to different schools. They travel miles. I actually spoke to a therapist in Australia, she flies to the school that she goes to work in, that's nuts, and the carbon emissions on that. And it also reduces paper. Everything's online, so you're not constantly printing out lots of paper resources, or just those that are necessary. So just to show a little bit of, there's a slide missing. I don't know what I'm called. What's the slide missing? quite a few slides missing. I don't know what's happened. Okay, I'll just talk you through our impact data. So just to share some of our impacts so far. So to date in March, we're in over 600 schools across the UK. And we currently have, on their children, have about 4,500 active targets. And already just in September, so what, we're just a term and a half into the school, no, we're about halfway through the academic year, 600 of those targets have been met. And they're the ones that have been recorded. I would assume there's not, that everyone's very busy, there'll be lots that haven't been recorded. 97% of staff through our impact measures have said that they reported the content was helpful. 90% have said it's changed their practice. And I think that's most importantly, there's a bit where children can feedback. Was it helpful? Did it make a difference? And 90% of children have said that it was helpful, which I think is powerful. Really exciting for us as well, just that gives us this feedback. We've been shortlisted for a few different awards. People might have seen on the 12 at 12. Some of you might have voted. There was a so thanks if you voted. But we got a highly commended HSJ award recently for digital efficiency. And yeah, we just got our 2 social impact awards, the Digital Leaders Awards. So one was the People's Choice, which was very exciting, and one about social impact and health tech. I think what we know is really important now, thinking about impact data. Imagine a slide here with graphs on. Is that we need to keep gathering that impact. So the platform itself gathers impact. We've just added a new feature that does a pre and post. So the first time you log on, a member of staff logs on, it asks them, how confident are you? How much access do you have to these things? And then it automatically asks them 10 months later. So you hope, fingers crossed, they've used it, they feel more confident, they have more access to tools. So that will be built in. But then there is something around, in the next 12 months, we're really keen to really focus. And we know that the interventions we're using are evidence-based, and we know that video modelling works, but there is something about Verbo and doing a proper clinical effectiveness study and doing some research to pull all of those things together to see how it makes a difference. Some of those things about waiting lists and referrals, it's really hard to get that data. We've been using our speech and language team to try and gather it. It's tricky to get that. The other feature that's on there is we've just added a pop-up which is asking people to share a case study, because I actually think in speech and language care you can have a child that has intervention, they achieve all their targets, but does it actually make a difference in their life? They've learned to use past tense, they're putting sentences together, but can they go to the shop, which is what they wanted to do, and buy a chocolate bar? Is it making a difference? Is it transferring? And that's when those case studies are really, really important and valuable in getting that pupil voice. In a minute, I just wanted to, we're going to have I've got a little video to hear from some of our users, but I just wanted to go back to that first slide and just think about how we use Verbo and the technology it has, and how those tools could maybe change that journey for a child. So being able to have early identification, access to intervention and monitored targets, all without waiting, good quality referral to appropriate services, joint working between all the professionals and with their parents and carers as well, resulting in a child positively participating in the community. So that means having friends, if they want friends, accessing academic work and exams, and then finding employment, and most importantly, improve well-being and mental health. That's the most important thing. And hopefully, well, if you've got instant access to those things, it reduces that cycle. And then also you can see the impact that can have on the community and the social benefits. So, we really hope that Verbo can act as a centralised solution, and it has really good potential to reduce health inequalities across speech and language therapy care. And I think what I've learned a lot about is how technology really can be self-sustaining, even amid some of the recruitment crises, budget restraints, all of those things. It can really still be there. And the other thing is about it being an economy of scale, right? So our team doesn't have to increase at the rate it would have if we win. And the most important thing is having this in place, is improving the children and young people's outcomes. And that's what we want to do. That's the ultimate goal. So I would be a true speech therapist, Martina. We love a reflection, right? And this has been, it's been quite a journey. I wrote down for myself. My voice is crazy. I've been sat at home snuffly. And I was like, what are my key takeaways from this journey? And so in speech therapy style, I was thinking of the 3 key takeaways. And I think one of my things is, so I went back to horrible slides that have legal and contracts. It's like, one of the things was, I think when I went into this, I started with an entrepreneur program, and I knew some things about speech therapy, but I didn't know anything about anything else. And that kind of like imposter syndrome. I felt like I had to know everything. All these people teaching me things, I thought, crikey, I don't know what that was. I was just laughing with Martina. I was like, what's an angel investor? I don't know what that is. What's a venture capitalist? I've never even heard those words before. But actually knowing that I don't need to know all that, and that's okay. I didn't need to, it's like I was at the beginning of my career again, learning all these new things, but actually that's okay. And finding that I think that's my first learning. Don't always feel like you have to know everything, but find the experts in your network. Find a team that you trust. And keep them close. Your team are your champions. And then I think another massive thing I've learned through this, and this is probably from our technical team, I'd say, as speech therapists, I'm just a perfectionist. I just want everything to be just right. And we'd constantly be saying, oh, but it doesn't do this, the platform doesn't do this. And the tech team would say to us, but it does so many amazing things, just stop, calm down, and stop. So I think that that's really important, to appreciate what you do have and take time to consolidate and not have to go at 1,000,000 miles an hour, which we do go at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But when people say, we were talking yesterday about like you go into a clothes shop and you see a black dress. You don't go and ask the shop assistant if you've got a black dress. You say, oh, you've got that in yellow. And we find out with Verbo, people are like, well, but does it do this? And that makes us internally panic. Oh, no, it doesn't. It should do that. We're going to change it so it does that. But actually, people are just curious. And also, it's okay that it does this and it doesn't do that. And that's all right. And I think that, being at one with that and okay with that has been a big learning. And we're at a really good place now where we can build our team so that we're not just a clinical team. So we've got our tech team, we've got our clinical team, but we're also building a marketing team, getting people to support us with the right tasks, so I'm not losing sleep over data protection and contracts. But just thinking about what and one thing we love to do is translate the content to improve accessibility, particularly for families. We love multilingual families, and it also, so we started rolling out at the University of Sydney in Australia, but it would be great to have more opportunities in so there's no barriers, basically no barriers to access. And here you can see we've had lots of interest from other disciplines. So the technical framework is there. You can put anything on there. So you can put occupational therapy, educational psychology, teaching, other clinical psychology, with the idea that you complete a screener, you get some targets, and you get some intervention, so that it's a one-stop shop. So children's care is integrated. The other thing that's actually come up on the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme is chatting to some GPs and thinking about how could this support other care pathways. So one GP was talking to me about, well, if I had a quick screener to do with a parent in clinic, they could go away with a login with a few activities. That might be for me to say, well, I don't think you need to worry too much right now. Here's some games though, come back if you're still worried in 6 months. Or I've made a referral that is going to take some time, but here's some things you can do in the meantime. So, there's interesting times ahead. And I think that's kind of all from me. I just thought we'd finish up if this works. I hope it worked. It worked, I needed it before. Yes. So this is a video, just I think 3 or 4 minutes, if you can go with it, just to hear from some of our users and to hear what they think of the platform. Let me, fingers crossed.
So we came across Verbo initially at one of the TES Send conferences. A member of my team found it, and what we thought when we saw it was, this is absolutely amazing, because actually what it could do for us is address the recruitment crisis that we're all probably experiencing nationally as well as locally.
As Senko, it's freed up more of my time. Previously I've been modelling activities, making resources, and now I can just use the Verbo app instead.
So far my favourite feature on Verbo has been the incredible videos that are so useful to clearly demonstrate the activities in such a short window as well. Them being so, like a short snippet has really made it accessible to the staff, because time is so valuable.
As a school, Verbo helps us to solve the period between a child being flagged as a concern and then going on to the speech and language caseload, so the teacher can complete the screener, it gives some targets to work on, interventions to use, and then we can see if the child really needs a speech and language referral or not.
They will allow staff to build up a picture of the student and they can access it quite easily. They don't rely on other members of staff. It's open for them as well, and they can use all that information to help them support the student or within the lessons.
The main problem that I'm trying to solve with Verbo is that we don't have any support at a universal targeted level within our local authority, and we're using Verbo to plug that gap.
Is that it makes it really easy for school staff to know how to work on targets. So you can do your screening, you can identify your target areas, and then it's so clear for school staff exactly what they need to do to work on targets. So instead of me needing to spend time going in and modelling to individual staff how to work on things like pronouns, the videos are there, they don't have to wait for me, they can watch it in their own time and they can get going straight away with supporting the children.
Verbo has helped me a lot as a speech language therapy assistant because it's good to be able to go on to there and get ideas what other people are doing in other schools. All TAs can see how other TAs run groups. And so it gives them ideas and helps them with their groups.
I've been massively impressed by Verbo. I think that it's one of those things that I wish I thought of myself, and it is like something, it's nothing that I've seen before, and it makes perfect sense. It fits a gap so perfectly, and so yeah, I've been really impressed by what it has to offer.
Verbo has allowed me to gather all the information and keep it in one sort of tight digital location, which is very helpful.
The main difference that we've seen thus far is the access to the information at any given time, and just how quick it is to basically turn on the computer and get all the information that you need in one place very, very quickly about a particular child, activity, and input that we've had with that child over the course of time.
So in terms of what I would tell a school who's considering using Verbo, I would say it's well worth signing up for a trial. I think you'll be surprised at the extensive resources that are available and all of the different things that Verbo has to offer in terms of screening, in terms of training, in terms of videos, and I really can see the benefit to schools to signing up to Verbo and using it to support their children with speech, language and communication needs.
I would tell someone else who's thinking about using Verbo to just do it. It's the most useful tool I have to hand. It saves me a lot of time. It means that I have got information immediately. I'm not waiting for someone to email me back or to come into school.
Very, very impressive stuff. Any questions from the floor?
First of all, congratulations, you're very proud. Well done, taken a flag around the room. The question is, if you're not English speaker, can it work on other language like Hindi or something like that?
Yeah, so for children's speech and language development, what we look at when we're working with children in the UK who have English, if they're exposed to English, if they've got difficulties in both languages, then it's likely that they will have a speech and language difficulty. If they've just got difficulties in one language, whichever language they're learning, then it's more likely English is an additional language. So if they're receiving education, and if they've got difficulties in both languages, so we've identified that it's a speech and language difficulty, rather than learning English as an additional language, then the activities will help. They are only present at the moment, everything is in English though. So the member of staff or the parent accessing those activities would have to be able to access English. They could translate them into a home language. But yeah, that's our dream. We'd love that. We'd love a grant. We'd love a grant to translate all of
worldwide.
Yeah, and it breaks down all the barriers, right? If you can have it in different languages. And it's actually, the content all exists. it's a tiny task, but it's actually quite simple. You just need some interpreters to do voiceovers. Yeah.
Thank you.
One day.
Please.
So one of the challenges is servicing the technical debt, where it seems like, a big obstacle to overcome, and finding the right individual to build a complex platform. So, it sounds like you collaborated with Michael, which makes sense, because obviously he's obviously been through that process already, but have you got any advice to anybody going through that? Because that seems like a big obstacle, finding the right person to be able to actually do the nitty-gritty for you.
Yeah, I think what was important, I met Michael, and that, we got on with each other. I think the big thing was he got it. Like, often people don't really understand what we do. and when I spoke to him about speech and language therapy, he didn't say, "Oh, you just treat stammers," or he did, or you elocution lessons. That wasn't his first response. He got it. He had some of his own experiences of speech and language, and I think that went a long way. I spoke to some other technical companies where they did, so I guess also the difference is he was working in the NHS, so he as the CEO of his company, they were supporting a lot of health tech. So I think that would be my advice, is looking for companies who have got experience in whatever field you're looking at, because they'll be better able to get their heads around that. Because I spoke to some other companies who weren't in the health tech field, and that was an absolute, I was trying to spend so long explaining how we worked in schools. So actually, I suppose for me, it was a blank slate. I could either go to someone who understood speech and language, or who understood schools and children. I think that would be my advice.
There's just so many, if you go to these people, everybody always tell you they can do it. So you go and talk to the tech person and say, "Oh yeah, I can do that." But in reality, there are different levels, different tranches of skills and experience. And finding somebody who's really good is actually quite challenging.
I think the other thing is, well, one thing I've learned about communicating with the technical team is getting, and this is just a classic, it's just communication skill, isn't it? But getting them to repeat back to you what they think you've said and what they've interpreted by that. We made that error, assuming, but we all do that in communication, right? We make assumptions. The other thing I think is, I don't know how different this is, but they have so many different skill sets in their team as well. So one thing that's been really valuable to us is they've got a UX designer. And they also seem to have a very steady team, people don't change. And actually, I really love that 2 of our tech developers actually had speech and language therapy all through their upbringing. So I did get to meet them, I met them at a conference, and one of them was like, "Oh," and actually he had therapy for a stammer, so I said that, he didn't say stammer, but and he said, I had a speech therapist all the way through, so that was really lovely. He really did get it, because he'd experienced the service. But yes, you are right, it's really important to get the right tech team and the right fit. I think also talking to other people who work with them as well. So I had the clinical entrepreneur program, so people knew who Blue Power were, people on there worked with them. So I was able to get feedback from kind of trusted sources. I don't know if you can do that as well.
So Bina, you could introduce different tech companies as well, can't you?
Yeah.
So I know I worked with somebody else, and we were being kindly introduced just to 4 or 5 different companies, and then we just went and discussed with them. So that's another way.
I also just think there's an element of just a gut feeling. There's a feeling when you get to, and if you, because communication is everything. Your communication relationship is everything, because actually, even if you can be really good at something or really terrible at something, but if you can't communicate about it, it doesn't matter how great you are at doing that skill. So I think your gut says a lot, and you need to, meeting lots of different people is a really good idea.
Excellent. Any other comments, questions from people? Can I ask something? So you reflected on, it sounds incredible. First, amazing work. It sounds incredible. You're essentially bringing your expertise into the community and making them more accessible. But how do you find out if that's truly effective or improving patient outcomes? Have you been able to demonstrate that?
It's really hard. That's what I was talking about. It's really hard. So you can get. So we call the impact data on progress towards targets. So some of those quantitative things are more straightforward to pull. And like I was saying, I think the true outcome It's the child's life actually changed. So, you know, like you have a child who achieves their exams, they get all their targets, they do all these things, but has it made a difference to their life and their functionality, their well-being, their happiness? So what we've got, what we're putting at the moment is in post-16, the young person gets to log in, and we've got some visuals on there to hear their voice. And so we're trialing it with the post-16 population just because of GDPR law and then being able to have access. But if that data is successful, we'd like to roll that out so we can get the pupil voice of all children. Because I also think you can wrap all the other data around it, but often people don't, especially the children who have communication difficulties, we don't ask them. We don't ask what impact things have had on them, if that made a difference. Sure. So that would be really good when we're able to roll that.
And then you can look at the soft outcomes, like, you know, referral, number of patients.
And that's also, it's hard to get, it's hard to get. So we're doing that interacting because we ask these therapy teams, we're asking them how many people have been discharged. So whether they're discharged a patient in school and say, use Verbo instead, or a teacher might say they want to make a referral, and they'll say use Verbo instead for now. So we can get that data. But I think it's a challenge, and over time we'll build up that data.
Absolutely, not to, because that will be your, I'm using my health economics hat, that will be your ticket to prove that this is, you know, it is really, really having hard improvement of quality of life for your local community. And I think it will do, quite frankly. I think it will not only reduce your referrals, you'll improve patient outcomes, you'll change the model of care, so that's brilliant, really, really well done. Thank you very much. Okay, guys, I think we've got a 10-minute break before our next speaker, Professor Young. So I don't know if anyone wants to nip out to the school or to get a quick cup of tea. And I'll see you.
Many years, Ong Shubovic is your clinical lead for respiratory. He's invited me loads of times, despite knowing him for 25 years I've never been, but there we are. So it's great to visit you here. And welcome to colleagues from the East of England Clinical Senate who are joining us virtually. And you're so small in the distance, I can't work out who's waved at me. But it's normally someone who's up there, he's quite a friendly guy. So welcome, although I may be wrong if you just said that. So look, what we're going to go through, research and innovation transforming patient, because that's what this is about, isn't it? I'm going to move pretty fast, and I'm also going to set the timer on my phone. Any of those of you who know me will know, hang on, 45 minutes you've given me, is I get too excited and I overspeak. And so that will stop me when the alarm goes, and that's it, I'm done. So I can't overspeak that. Good. So I thought I'd start off by setting the scene for kind of why I should be here talking to you today, but also what is happening in healthcare and what all of you, I think, have to do. So this is what I thought I was going to become when I was at medical school. I thought I was training to be a consultant surgeon. I knew quite early on that's what I wanted to do. And I was going to do one thing, which was be a consultant urologist. And that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I was training for that. And I was trained for that. And then I got through med school, and then I found I had to do a PhD. And during my PhD, I started my first company. I founded 4 companies, raised £5 million for them, exited them all. One I nearly lost my house on, and I made the money back, fortunately. And when I started doing my startups, I realised that I had to move from being this to being this. So I had to develop a whole load of skills that I wasn't taught at medical school, and I had to be able to do everything a bit. It doesn't sound the same as a beautiful violin soloist, I can tell you, but I had to be able to understand the commercial, the finance, the branding and marketing, legal and regulatory, the raising funding, the business plan. Things I was never taught, and you are still not taught at medical school, although that's going to change. And then, so I did that, and then I joined Mid and South Essex as a consultant surgeon and became Associate Medical Director there, responsible for innovation, now research and transformation too, in what we do. And then around 10 years ago, Sir Bruce Keogh asked if I would come to NHS England and take on this new role of National Clinical Director for Innovation. And Bruce said to me, I know what you are, and it was a little bit like this, he didn't put it quite like that, he said, but this is what you need to become. And that is actually, the conductor there is Professor Mike Thorne, my former Vice-Chancellor at ARU, and now the Chair of the Mid and South Essex Integrated Care Board, conducting the Saffron Walden, forgive me, orchestra. It's really dangerous to leave my alarm on because it's back, so forgive me. And the point Bruce was making is you have to get comfortable with change through your career. We need to educate our clinicians and our leaders for how do you change, how do you move forward in the future. I'm still a little bit uncomfortable that he wanted me to take that role on, but I've grown more used to that in what I'm doing now. So I think some important questions for me when I was asked to come up with this was, how do I get research and innovation to transforming patient care today? And that's what we're interested about at NHS England. We love to support long-term blue sky strategies and visions. We do that. That's what basic scientific research is about. But in healthcare, we want translational things that are changing quality of care and outcomes today, not in 10 or 20 years' time. I'll need the health services in 10 or 20 years' time, but we want to do it. So how can we do that today? And I'm going to tell you some thoughts, share some thoughts on that. And then the second thing is, why should you do research and innovation? It's hard enough, it's a day job. Do you not know? Are you not on the wards? Do you not see what the front door is like in A&E? And again, the hospital's full, and again, you're operating this as in cancer. Yes, I am still a practicing consultant at Southend, believe me. But if we didn't do it, the people with the lived experience of delivering those healthcare services who interact with our patients, who is going to do it? Who's going to be there for them, improving their services and transforming them? So I think we have to step forward. I think it's incumbent on us. And then when I had a briefing call with colleagues from the East of England Clinical Senate, I said, what do you want me to talk about? I'm double booked myself again, and can we do two things at the same time? And so they said, quite simple, just cover tech, innovation, AI, and what you do in clinical entrepreneurship. And just tell us everything there is to know about that, and you've got, what, 30 minutes left now, roughly. Okay, so I thought we'd have a little go at covering all of that. I'm going to go really fast, okay, through a whole load of things. You can have the slides later. Oh yeah, first of all, we need to understand the challenges. So one of the great things I have learned from my time in NHS England is that first seek to understand. If you don't do that, you will get it wrong. From our patients, from our clinicians, from our teams working in community and primary care, if we don't understand how they see healthcare from their perspective, what's important to them, what matters to them, we won't get it right. So what are the national challenges we have? Well, there are 6 broadly at NHS England workforce. We have a 10% vacancy rate. We know the pressures that were laid bare by the pandemic, and let alone the industrial action that has subsequently followed that. Recovery, well, we know it's 7-point-something million people waiting on this, mostly for outpatients, but surgery as well. Again, the pandemic made that worse, and industrial action has only impacted that even more. We're all feeling that impact at the moment, aren't we? Health inequality is another thing laid bare by the pandemic. Why should an oxygen saturation probe be good if you have non-pigmented skin? When your sats go down to 89, it's pretty accurate. But if you've got pigmented skin, good luck, because it won't be accurate when it gets to 89, so people didn't get escalated care at that result. You'll see I haven't got it in my slides today, and we're going to focus on AI, but there's some great technology that the Department of Health and NHS England are now supporting around doing all your vital signs from your eardrum, which is the same level of pigmentation in everyone, so you can do culturally and racially agnostic and vital signs. Net zero, we can't ignore the climate crisis. The world is heating up, and the NHS is contributing to that. 5% of all traffic on our roads is down to the National Health Service. Okay, it doesn't need to be that way. And look at all the things we use and then throw away so unnecessarily. I saw a great tweet from one of my ex-colleagues at NHS England, who's now at UCH, and they make cloth theatre caps with people's names on, and they give them a bag so they can wash them at home. Where was the clinical trial to show that you couldn't have a cloth hat that you washed at home, and the disposable ones we use to throw away the right things? It doesn't exist. So why can't we do things that are different? The long-term plan, published more than 5 years ago now, and still a really great document of how do we get excellent care pathways from the moment you're born right through your lifetime. Healthy, proactive, supportive, independent living as long as we can in the community, and then financial balance. It's happening everywhere. You saw a great announcement in the budget of extra money for technology, but based on productivity. Tech, and it is all about productivity. So for the first time in a generation, the government announced in the budget just over a week ago, 3.4 billion of new money. 430 million, you see, will go on transforming access to services. This is in addition to what everyone is already given. $1 billion to transform the use of data and reduce time, spend, improve productivity, and $2 billion to invest in our IT systems. Wow, that's not an opportunity on the basis to do some research and innovation. I don't know what is. I haven't seen that investment. Well, that kind of thing hasn't happened for 20 years. So it's a bold statement and step forward, and we've got to step up and take that one. It's a great opportunity. And then innovation. Because lots of people don't know what innovation is. Innovation has these 5 features. It must be new. It doesn't have to be a new invention. It can just be something that is new to your system. So it might be something that we've adopted in Mid and South Essex, but at the Homerton you haven't rolled it out. Or it might be Verbo, which you have at the Homerton, but we haven't used it in Mid and South Essex yet. It's just new to your system. Value, that could be in terms in cash release or productivity improvement, or just improvement in outcomes and quality of care for patients. It must be scalable. A smartphone is an innovation, but not if there's only one, it's only in my pocket. There has to be lots of them. It has to scale across the system. Empowerment. If you look at innovations, they empower patients, carers, clinicians, the workforce more widely. They all have that feature. And lastly, synergy. Synergy is the output, the sum of the components is greater than the parts. And when innovations come together, we do lots of things that are much greater than just the individual components. We're seeing that particularly in digital. And if you look at anything that you think is an innovation, almost always they have those 5 features. And then, I don't know if you've ever read any books, you know, someone who's made $1 billion and sold their company, writes a book and says, this is the way. The trouble is, if you started with 1,000 entrepreneurs, I'll tell you because I know 1,000 of them, they could all write a book. Only one of them is going to make $1 billion, and then suddenly we're expected to believe that. Okay, so I'm just about to do the same. Fred, if I write a book, which you say, if we look at things that were successfully adopted in the NHS, what features do they all have? And if you look at anything, and you could pick, for example, diabetes technology with wearable glucose sensors, we have led the world. The first country that every patient with type 1 diabetes has access to either continuous glucose monitoring or flash glucose monitoring, funded by the NHS. So it has these 5 features. It must address a national priority. Okay? Decreasing friction, so it's easy to get in. Digitally, that might be an API, but it's easy for patients or professionals to adopt and take forward. It must simplify the pathway, reducing steps, making it easy as well. Affordability, now by that really I mean in-year cash release. If you can do that, you've got our attention. And the last thing is real-world evidence. Randomized controlled trials are great. I'm not going to go against them on a research day, but they have their limitations too. And the best people in the world publish their best data. What about most people in the world who don't have this data? What's the real world evidence? And when we deploy that in our situation, and if you've got those 5 features which diabetes technology has, so we talked about HeartFlow, an AI system for looking at and deciding who would benefit from coronary stents or not, I could have looked at a range of other things. They all have those 5. So we have some innovation resources at NHS England, which we can support you with nationally. We'll talk a little bit about some of these, and I'm going to give you some great examples of innovations that have gone through the research process and are now being deployed. Our CEP, Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, I'll talk about the National Innovation Accelerator. Our Insights Programme has grown out of the Entrepreneur Programme. 18 NHS trusts across the country have been given some money by NHS England to help give the capacity and capability to NHS organisations to take up that innovation, to do that bit of research around it, to gather that real world evidence, to help prepare the business case, to help prepare the procurement case, to take that forward. And the great thing about these 18 organisations that we've pulled together, one set of paperwork, one R&D process, an ethics approvals process, one outline business case, one procurement case, to get it taken up. We're not replacing Trust's existing procurement procedures, not at all. We're creating an innovation pathway. And we took that from Tim Hodges, the Surgeon General, when he got into position as commander really of our joint armed forces from a medical perspective. He said, Tony, the procurement pathway was 2 years for a tank and 2 years for a surgical swab. It's unbelievable. I had to have an innovation pathway. So I said, that's really great, send me the details and can I copy that and take it forward? So we did, and that's in Insights. Our Small Business Research Initiative and funding like the Health Technology Acceleration Fund from the Department of Health help with real money. We've given out more than £100 million in the last 3 years for this innovation. Our Health Innovation Networks, I think you're in the UCL Partners one here in this part of London, you'll be familiar with this. 15 regional organisations are helping. And then a new thing, the NHS Innovation Service. So we pulled together all our expertise in NHS England. So for innovative products and companies, they can register, and we will help take you through the innovation process. What evidence do I need for NICE? What stage should I be submitting, that kind of thing? How do I get through the MHRA? What's going to be relevant for that? What else do I need to do to make sure the NHS is not going to turn me down and say, oh, you haven't done X, Y, Z. I need to know all those things now. So that's a really great resource. And then I wasn't going to embarrass you by asking you this, and then artificial intelligence. Okay, there are lots of definitions of AI, and it really talks about how machines can replicate the human brain and mind. Let me tell you, it's not possible. It's overhyped. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so I do have a PhD in neuroscience and physics as well. Which I did at UCL, it's 20 years ago now, but I've kept up to date, and it's absolutely fascinating, the discoveries we've now made on consciousness and how it works, and the complexity of how it's involved in different bits of your genome and all sorts of other things. We are equivalent to prehistoric, cave with AI at the moment compared to where the human brain has evolved to over millions of years. It's not going to get there anytime soon, and I'll show you how in a minute. But people talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, and there is a difference between the two, and it's a really important difference to understand. Okay, they both have learning modules, training data that set them up, but machine learning, the model is fixed. Okay, it doesn't change, whereas with artificial intelligence, depending on the results of the analysis it's done, they feed back in so it can start to improve itself. The main problem being that when it does improve itself and it's done in the wrong way, you might not get the result you were expecting. Has anyone heard of what happened at Unilever with their HR recruiting process? So yeah, a number of years ago now, they decided they had 250,000 applicants for jobs in a year. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, it's the future. We can shortlist candidates through this. That's what we're going to do. So they set the rules up, and the data set going in was all the applicants that were applying. And one of the rules they set was we want you to have the minimum time off work, and that you can have, we want employees who are at work and present. So they put that rule in, and for the next 6 months, they didn't shortlist a single one. They hadn't factored in that maternity leave is perfectly reasonable for people to take off. Now, it's probably illegal to discriminate in that way in legislation. So an unintended consequence. The best of intentions, machine learning, simplifying, reducing costs, that's just in shortlisting for jobs. What could happen in health? Training data sets are key. They're not published and made available. Who was the population? How were they selected? You selected 1 million people. Who were they? What does it represent? Is that applicable to this group? What assumptions have you made when you built that set? It's a bit like the 1940s and 50s in pharma at the moment with AI. Sorry, I was expecting this. I do have to take it. Hang on. Hello?
Good afternoon. This is Laura, the automated assistant from Homerton Hospital. Is this Professor Tony Young speaking?
It is.
Hi, I'm calling to follow up after your cataract surgery. Would this be a good time to talk?
It's a bit early, you're in a few slides' time, but actually, we can speak now.
Okay, shall I call back in 10 minutes?
No, now's good, Dora, thank you.
Before we start, I've got your birthday as the 19th of January. To make sure I'm speaking with the right person, can you tell me which year you were born?
1970.
Thanks, Professor Young. Are you happy for anonymized data from this call to also be used for training and research purposes?
Yes, I am.
Thanks. So this is just to see how your eye is healing and whether you need any support from one of our nurses. I've got some questions that should take a few minutes, and then I'll see if there's anything you'd like to ask. I can't help with anything urgent, so if you think you have an emergency issue, it's important you contact the hospital. Before we start, some patients have both eyes operated on in the same surgery. Did you have cataract surgery on both of your eyes at the same time?
No, I didn't.
Okay, thanks. So, I've just got a few simple questions about your eye. First up, is your eye red?
It is a little red, actually, yes.
Is it just red in the corner by the nose, or is it red all over?
It's red all over.
Okay, I've made note of that for the doctor. Is your eye painful?
No, it's not.
Okay, has your vision improved as you expected since the surgery?
Yes, it's really good, thank you.
Good. And since the operation, have you had an increase in floaters, small dark dots, squiggly lines, or cobwebs in your vision?
No, I haven't.
Okay, and lastly, have you had any new flashing lights, like camera flashes, in your vision?
No, not at all. And Dora, I'm going to end it now. Thank you very much for ringing me. Good. So that happens in a couple of slides' time. That is the most, but having just about to diss AI and its overhype, I also wanted to show you the most advanced AI in clinical practice, direct pathways now, anywhere in the world is in the National Health Service. But I'll tell you about Dora in a minute. So, AI and machine learning training data sets important. Just tell me where the training course is for AI in our undergraduate or postgraduate curriculums. Well, we've got clinical research fellows. Where are our AI fellows? There's a few, very limited. We're going to need clinicians to really be involved in this and have AI practitioners in the future. We can't get away with that. It's not official NHS England policy, it's just a view of what we see coming, to be clear. What uses does AI have in healthcare? Operational uses for sure. Lots of behind the scenes things. I'm going to come on to some of them in a minute and give you those examples. Clinical things, you've seen Dora just there now. I'm going to show you some data on Dora. and research things for sure. Drug discovery, we're discovering new compounds and testing them with AI, doing a whole lot of other things too. But there's a lot of great news. Nature Medicine yesterday, day before, AI actually made radiologists worse at reading chest x-rays. You'd have thought the junior, less experienced ones would have benefited more from it. No, it made them worse. And even the senior clinicians struggled more with it. So don't believe everything you read about AI. Now, they had a problem in Belgium recently, because everyone is going off to work in the tech industry. And so this kind of construction recruitment company in Antwerp put this up. And what they did was they got a 6-fold increase in applicants for jobs in the construction industry as a result of that ad. Because people think ChatGPT can do everything, but it can't put a building up. And it can't do your operation anytime soon. Or hold your hand and comfort you when you need it. Or take you through a super complex explanation where you're showing empathy and understanding of what that human being is going through. So it will do lots, and it is a revolution, believe me. But it can't put a building up, and it can't do surgery. Okay? Having said that, there is an example where it can in a minute, but you know what I mean. That was great. That I loved. So good. Right. And then the last thing I said I'd cover was the clinical entrepreneur program. So, 10 years ago when I started at NHS England, doctors were raising money to do startups and quitting, and Sir Bruce Keogh came to me and said, Tony, we need to sort it out, we need to keep them in the NHS. Long story short, he said solve it. So we developed an entrepreneurial workforce development program. And we've done it in entrepreneurship, and so I think we can do it in AI too. And what this does is it gives you a commercial coach and mentor, whole load of educational days across the year. Caroline here in the audience is one of our entrepreneurs. Less than full-time training. If you're still in training, we can help you with that. I can't guarantee it. We connect you to customers and funding. We give you support in testing and trialing and taking forward your innovation. Networking events, industry days, and a whole range of other things. But instead of me telling you that, I thought I'd just show you this, which comes from our recent event, to show you what the art of the possible is when you empower your frontline.
You as clinical entrepreneurs have the role of making the unimaginable imaginable. You think differently. You think out of the box. You take the common building blocks that we have around us, you organise them in a different way to make something new, something exciting, and sometimes something truly revolutionary.
And the NHS Clinical Entrepreneur Programme has turned a brain drain into a brain gain.
Not only do you get innovators with the most extraordinary innovations, but what we weren't expecting was that clinical entrepreneurs change the culture within the NHS if you allow them to do it.
Over 180 million patients, professionals and users have already benefited from innovations created on the programme.
That's the bit that is progress. That's the bit that reimagines the future. That's the bit that the unimaginable gets written down and disseminated so that people take life science to the next step.
When you listen to those pitches, listen out for that transformation, listen out for that moment where you silently think in your head, wow, just wow.
Innovation is how we get to a better world.
So that was the Royal Geographical Society in London. It took 700 people. We had 1,000 people who wanted to come to that. Okay, just incredible what you can do when you empower your workforce. These are our stats. I always like figures, so we can be measured. 505 startups founded during the Clinical Entrepreneur Programme. Over 180 million patients and professionals benefited from the programme. £971 million raised by them, nearly £1 billion raised so far. But the figure I'm actually proudest of is the one over on the far side there, 333 clinicians who quit or were going to quit, stayed as a result of the programme. Quite, so we turned a brain drain into a brain gain. Quite astounding. I haven't given them any money. We've given them permission, blessing, support, air cover, pulled them together in a network of like-minded individuals. So we're going to whip through some examples to wonder why this should be true. So I was asked to present to the Mid and South Essex Integrated Care Board recently on vision and strategy and the future and how we might bring research and innovation into that. And this is an example from our real world evidence. So this is AbTrace, who founded by Umar Ahmed, one of our clinical entrepreneurs, and this runs on about 3 million primary care records, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, scanning them, both for the codes, but also using natural language processing to pick up other things that are there in the record. And it's a bit like a pit stop in a Formula One race. If the human beings are like Formula One cars doing the laps of life, then what they do is AbTrace monitor their electronic record and look for, when did you need that blood pressure check, that medication review? When did you need to come in for that screening test? When did you need that blood test? And actually, you've got 20 appointments scheduled for that across the next year. Can we safely group them together so you just come in for 4 instead of 20? And it turns out you can. And where can we get that most effectively done? So we looked, don't tweet this slide please, because I've shared this privately from Mid and South Essex. This is our vulnerable data in the East of England region. And you know, my chief exec and my ICB gets measured on hypertension monitoring, on how we've optimized the control. Here we are on cholesterol control and monitoring it. And we're in the bottom half, for sure, for most of it in the East of England region. And when I got AbTrace to have a look at that and said, let's just, what is it? It's about 10 pence a patient to run it on your systems. It's unbelievable. What would happen if we ran that across our systems? We would be the best performer in the East of England region for all those tests. We would reduce pressure on primary care by bringing appointments together. Patient will get excellent management of their long-term conditions and their screening. And of course, if you can make an impact on cardiovascular disease through this real world data, we're not waiting for a randomized control trial to give us the results. We're waiting for your results now that are happening on your electronic record, and we're intervening as a result. Next one, oh wait, there's a different one. This is a diagnostic. This is a NutriCheck. This is from Saif Ahmed, a clinical oncologist at Addenbrooke's. And this is the world's first point-of-care diagnostic for use at home that will tell you if your white count is 0, normal, or high. Designed it for diagnosing neutropenic sepsis on chemotherapy. There are 50,000 admissions in the NHS each year with that. And a simple lateral flow technology, drop of blood. If you're on chemo and you go, oh, I'm not feeling quite right, people will often sit on it a day, 2 days, 3 days before they get very sick and come in. Now they can put a finger drop of blood on there. If their white count's normal, they go, that's fine. I'll just contact my clinician in the morning if I'm not feeling better. If it's 0, they go into A&E and get admitted. And if it's high, then they might start the antibiotics they've got. If they've got a prescription, they're available to them. So remarkable is this, than the first of its kind in the world. Macmillan Cancer Relief, the charity, have made their first investment in a startup in their history. Pretty impressive. Next, this is, I was meant to be here when the Euphemia call came through, okay, so this is Euphemia. I took too long, I know, so right, so it uses natural language processing to do follow-up of low complexity, high volume procedures. So as you heard, the AI system will ring the patient and either it will be a green flag and take you through, and that's fine, you don't need to be seen, or it will refer it back to the doctor, or the clinician, I should say, that's looking after that patient. And here are the results. They did a big evaluation across both northeast and southeast, northwest and southeast London. And approximately, the figures are, and this was over 5,000 patients that went through this real-world study. But sorry, you know, the figures have gone up, of course, consultation automated to 17,000 now. Around 2/3 of patients can be safely screened and discharged by the AI system. You heard it screaming just there, thinking, right, ICBs now, and why shouldn't that be rolled out nationally? We've got the evidence, we can take it forward, we can do this. Or watch this.
It's really difficult to keep up with the latest guidelines now. They're getting really complicated as well, especially if we always get treatments. I'm an optimist, I'm an associate professor of cardiology, and we created Medicaid to ensure patients get private medications every time. We're upskilling prescribers by teaching them about the latest recommendations. So you can click on a main disorder, and then you can put in multi-morbidity, so you can select as many of these as you like, type 2 diabetes. And then Medicaid uses AI to suggest smart features that will help to narrow down the search for the most relevant medications that you're interested in. So I just fill this out with really common things. High bleediness, no. Your next condition, no. 12 months, no. Yes. No. Just fraction over 40%. HbA1c. And you can see with just a few clicks, very detailed information about what the recommended medications are for these different clinical features. And I can see if I click here, I get the exact text from the NICE website explaining why this should be used.
And then if you click on that, it will take it through the NICE to the NICE guideline. So Medicaid, an AI system from a coding AI professor of cardiology in Birmingham, they did this. Did you know there are 50 million different combinations of medication you can be given after a heart attack? Now, even me as a urologist, I can't work out what to give. So what hope does a cardiologist have? None whatsoever. I'm joking. What human being can do that? There isn't one. So here is an AI system. Now, this is just an educational tool at the moment. You can have a look. Medicaid, the ages of AI rather than the normal way. What it's doing is people are learning and training themselves and it's saying, okay, I've got this patient with this, what does it say? And it saves you going and looking through all the latest guidelines that you can't possibly keep up with. You don't then have to prescribe them. You can look at it and go, actually, that's very sensible. Equally, if you're an integrated care board, you might say, who's not on NICE recommended medications across our system and can we screen them for it? Because we know that if you're on NICE recommended treatments, there's a 50% reduction in morbidity and mortality. Real world evidence, real screening. I think that's amazing. And I can see that transforming the way we prescribe. You don't have to carry around the DNF and the NICE website in your head anymore. AI tools can really help us transform them. I think that one is amazing, one to watch. Very soon. And Zubera, another startup out of UCL this time. This is home blood pressure monitoring, whole pathway management, okay? Either takes referrals from primary care or detects the cases, sends you a Wi-Fi blood pressure cuff in the post. Very simple digital log-on process. They also have support for those that don't feel digitally able to take that forward for how they do that. They can have an online consultation with a prescriber pharmacist who will give them medication, and then all the blood pressure is repeated, but all the GP sees is great managed blood pressure. Now they're not taking on the severe cases, the multi-drug hypertension cases that are difficult, that rightly need their primary care clinicians to look after them directly. This is the mild to moderate, straightforward cases that are the majority, now being managed whole pathway in the community. That's a massive impact on public health. Cardiovascular disease and blood pressure is one of the big five that will radically transform. And it's a third cheaper than doing it face-to-face. It's coming. Next, Buku Medicine. I love this. And it's free. This is Alex Landridge, a consultant hematologist in Newcastle. So you can go and download it. I've got it, and you know if you've made it as an entrepreneur, if your app's on my phone, and it's on my phone, I love it. Okay? Totally free. He just said, we're getting all this advice and guidance through from primary care and hematology about what do I do if my lymphocyte count is this, and my monocytes are this. Well, I don't know, to be honest. But how do you expect colleagues in primary care who aren't hematologists to keep up with the latest guidelines on that? So he initially just wrote a book on it, and then he's put it into an app. And then colleagues from other specialties like renal and gastro and neuro and others started to say, well, we've got a frequently asked questions kind of list as well. Could we put that on the app? So now 45,000 clinicians have downloaded and regularly used, mostly across the north of England, I have to say, that's what it is, the Buku Meds app. And I'm putting that forward in Mid and South Essex for us to start promoting and adopting it to help colleagues in primary care. And their figures are, is it on there? It's around, there we go, reduces haematology referrals by 20% and improves the quality of the remainder by 50%. Imagine percentage 20%, preventing 20% of errors just through freely available information. Oh, I love this. There's no sound to this. So this is the environment, isn't it? This is the environmental crisis. The NHS is responsible for 5% of traffic on our roads. Everyone said, you'll never make it happen, Tony. It can't be done. The NHS will never fly things by drone. And this is the world's first chemotherapy delivered by drone between Newcastle Hospital and Alnwick up in the borders. It can take 6 hours to travel between Alnwick and Newcastle by car for patients to come to the cancer centre. And now we can fly their chemo to them. We're also doing it between Portsmouth Hospital and the Isle of Wight, not for tweeting, please, or announcing. This summer, you will see that civil aviation authorities still have to approve it. The world's first secure flight corridor in a capital city for autonomous drone logistics happening between Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital along the River Thames. So all the tourists crossing the bridges will see thousands of flights a day going along there between the battery-operated, rechargeable, green traffic on our roads and making sure those supplies are available for healthcare. Everyone said it wouldn't happen. We are leading the world. Where are Google Wing doing their trial? In London, in the National Health Service. Next to health, quite amazing. So this is the world's leading smartphone otoscope. Not only does it look at your ear and you can suck your earwax out of it, which is really important, it does AI diagnostics on your eardrum, and also we'll do a hearing test for you. So it's an all-in-one hearing care solution. So audiology services are now commissioned by our ICBs, quite a fragmented process and pathway, but technology can change that. Earwax is a real problem, particularly as you get older. Not just deafness, depression, loneliness, isolation, falls, worsening of dementia symptoms, just by something really simple that we could do and taking it out of hospitals and putting it into communities. We've run trials across Mid and South Essex in community pharmacies. It's been trialled across London now and in Kent, Surrey and Sussex as well. They've just produced fantastic health economic paper. And I'm really pushing this forward at NHS England. We should be investing in this tech. Let's get it out of secondary care and get it into the community. But it's not all tech and other things. Simple things around mental health here. So important. The Dr. Julian platform is set up by one of our entrepreneurs, and it allows you to do online cognitive behavioural therapy with an NHS therapist at a time of your choosing. So you can either have the platform as an integrated care system, or you can just and put your own therapist on it, or you can use therapists from across the nation who can provide that. I think he's in, I want to say 8 to 10 ICBs now. In primary care, one of the things I hear about it all the time. I'm married to primary care in Essex, I'm afraid, so every dinner time conversation is about primary care in Essex. And one of the big things is mental health care. And people just can't get access in a timely way to the services. So digital can really help us. It's not the whole answer, but there's lots of things coming together here, aren't they? And when you add them up, they start to help us build a digital health service. I like this one as well. We're nearly coming to the end of these. So this is Breastbook UK. It's the booking process that we're planning to roll out across the East of England region. We're getting alignment and blessings from all the breast surgeons in the region. If you've got a breast lump, you don't need to go and see your GP. You can go straight through a specialist pathway. We don't need someone in the middle curating it. And in Mid and South Essex, we did our figures. So this is the thing that tips us over the edge for our cancer waiting time. So we're not meeting the national standards for those. this simple app, it comes from our clinical director for breast surgery who's developed it in Midland South Essex. We're 75 slots short per week, 260 referrals a week, but we're short by 75 of slots in clinic for them to be seen. And what this does, if we bring this in across our system, we're looking at doing that now, people who have got breast pain, for example, can be referred straight to see the breast nurse. But at the moment, the only way through is to go straight into the breast clinic, and you get a triple assessment there and what you do. So by bringing this simple pathway in and allowing patients, potentially allowing patients, I should say, direct access to booking into that, it would allow us to meet our diagnostic standards that we're set to, and then go up to 92% in our area overall. And it's transformative. And that has come out from a clinician, one of our clinical entrepreneurs as well, who happens to be our director of breast, our clinical director for breast surgery. And I think this is the last one now because of my time. Deep medical. So if you saw the papers at the weekend, I'm sure you all read the NHS England website for our press releases. It's compulsory reading. Last Thursday, we managed to get this out. And what Deep Medical do are they predict non-attendance at an outpatient appointment. 2 weeks in advance, they can tell you whether someone is going to turn up for clinic or not. So we looked at our position in Mid and South Essex. This is what we do. We see 1.35 million patients a year. 109,000 don't show, but 46,000 cancel their appointment within 2 days of that happening, and that's too short notice for us to get someone else in. So, through the Deep Medical algorithm, they're able to identify of all the patients who are coming, who the DNAs and short cancellations are likely to be, because there are a number of consistent factors the machine learning system has worked out. And you can decrease it with text messaging, you can decrease it with a call ahead of time, but who do you pick? You can't ring every single person. The human resource required for that would be immense. So, by bringing in this system now, we've done it across 3 specialties. The results, we published our initial evaluation of that. We can fill 100% of our outpatient slots. No more empty. 12 million slots per year not attended in the National Health Service, and 7-point-something million patients on the waiting list, 70% waiting for outpatients. If we were to roll this out nationally, it could help solve the backlog within a year. And this has come from a medical registrar at Everton and St Helens, who designed this process and has been taking it forward. Health Minister was really impressed, Lord Barker, there we are on the time, and he put a comment in the press release. It went to number 10 this week. Really like it, really want to support it. NHS are going to support the expansion of this kind of technology across 10 more trusts, and then we're going to look to see what we do nationally. Every time we see a patient fill one of those slots, we're improving quality of care, we're improving access to care, we're reducing pressure on primary care. That's what we need to do. And this all came from our work. Amazing. So what does the clinician of the future look like? So I think this is what we're training clinicians for. I don't think you can just be a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist. And I don't think you can just be a clinical academic either. I think you have to understand the commerce and the science and about partnerships and the technology, as well as the medicine and the PDSA quality improvement cycles and the innovation and the entrepreneurship and the AR. I think we have to train multilinguists who can speak all these languages. So when I moved from a soloist to a one-man band to then, I'm not saying we all have to be this kind of one-man band, but you need to train to get those skills. How are we going to deliver on commission and services if we don't? But the very last thing is what I say for the greatest innovation that there is, that I have seen. I keep getting asked, will you send up to number 10 what the greatest innovations that we should just expand on? But this is undoubtedly, in my view, the greatest innovation in healthcare. And that is this. That is our workforce. the most amazing asset that we have, the most malleable, the most flexible, the most wonderful thing. So these are the clinical entrepreneurs on the steps of the Royal Institution a year ago now. A diverse workforce of all professions, of different backgrounds and geographies and experiences, coming together around the focus of can we transform patient care through research and innovation, and can we improve the quality of care today? And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, do we have any questions from the floor?
And I don't know if there are going to be any questions online. You're on that, are you? Good. So if any colleagues from the east of England haven't yet gone to sleep following that urological lecture, then by all means ask a question.
Please, yes.
We were talking about the medical and with regards to appointments. But something that happened today, and I imagine happens to most of the consultants, is sometimes patients forget to stop, let's say DOACs or warfarin or any blood thinners pre-op. So could you use a similar kind of data set and work towards analysing which patients, for example, elderly or people with issues of vision, for example, are more likely to require cancellations for things which are totally preventable?
So that's a really great idea. I like it. I don't know whether it would stand up as a business on its own. Poor old Caroline's going, don't roast him in the audience. The entrepreneurs know we give very honest and open feedback. So I agree it's an issue. There are a number of startups trying to address that, particularly in the pre-operative space. So Definition Health is one of them. They've been on the National Innovation Accelerator and they do your whole pre-operative journey. And it should be captured in that. But are there ways of screening your electronic record, like we saw with Medicaid, that looks at things and makes recommendations that will just flag it up when it comes to the time of surgery? Yes, there are. But is it all done? Has some big company gone and designed it? Can we rely on the tech giants to do it all? No, we can't. They're not doing it. I think there's a real opportunity for people with lived experience of healthcare. And one of the things actually I'm proudest of this year is that our big event, we launched our patient entrepreneur program. So 12 patients, NHS England are now funding. The first time ever it's a pilot, we're going to see how it goes. We had 70, 80 applicants, the most incredible lived experiences of people who've come up with ideas to transform care, and we're bringing on the program. So just like you've identified that problem, first of all, we need to see what's out there and how we deal with that. And then decide if it's worth sticking in the company. Because lots of great ideas may be kind of intrapreneurship. We should just improve this for quality improvement purposes, rather than this is going to be a big business.
You say you get too many people applying for your entrepreneur program. How can we as an NHS support people who have an idea that is potentially changing?
So I think it's nationally, we've got our academic health science networks and a range of resources at NHS England that can help support. But it's really difficult, isn't it, in trusts and in primary care as well, because there's so much focus on the operational delivery of healthcare that sometimes innovation and research are the poor relative in the sideline. You know, an emergency comes along, or pressures come along on certain things, and those happen. And that's one of the reasons why we launched the Insights program, which gives just a couple of £100,000 a year to trusts. It allows them to have a specific innovation lead, clinical lead, an exec or director lead, a full-time program manager, program support, so they can start helping your hospital and unit. Some hospitals are very research active and have lots of things going on there, but it's around those networks. You don't have to have every capability in one hospital. And I think, I mean, for a couple of clinical entrepreneurs I can see in the audience, they'll tell you themselves, the network, knowing other people, and where does that happen? How can I make that? We used to do it a lot. We used to be really good, and we've got to this thing where it's all virtual and you don't come and do in-person things like this anymore. And that ability to connect with real human beings and empathise with them and hear their story, it's so vital in what we do. So I think academic health science networks, research networks that we have that have just been reorganised, it's not easy and it's not all going to be done tomorrow, I get that. But believe me, there's a will in the centre to help support this. We want to be a really research active healthcare system. And sometimes we look abroad and think it must be so much better. They can't be under the same pressures. A professor of surgery from Poland was over recently and I was talking to him and he said it's worse. He said the things we've got about here is far worse than what we're doing. This is nothing compared to. So lots of people share the problems that we have around this. But in the pandemic, we led the world in research. You know, we disproved hydroxychloroquine, and I don't think we need to test bleach to prove you shouldn't follow that. But I think we, but then when you look at steroids, we were the people to prove through our research collaborations that so we can do it. We kind of lost our way a little bit. I think we need to find that again. And so supportive hospitals and growing, you've got a great hospital, aren't you, in London? You kind of stand out as a beacon. You are a wonderful organisation. So you can help.
You're right. Hey, thank you for the superb talk. Hey, you mentioned in one of your slides about the reduction of DNA rate using the software. Do you mind to talk a little bit more because you have to talk so much? Hey, how does it reduce, what was the characteristics picked up about?
So first of all, go and have a look at the Deep Medical website because there are a lot of case studies and videos that explain it. They don't use any person identifiable data whatsoever. It's all about how many appointments you've attended, how long between your admission and your appointment, what's the weather going to be like, what's the traffic like, are the roads being dug on those days? And they've now got to 98% positive predictive value, to say whether or not you'll be attended. So someone turning up to clinic happens once every 50 occurrences. And we record that and we have flexibility within the system to manage them. So it's transformed, but they use non-patient specific data in doing that. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it sounds too good to be true.
May I ask crazy?
It's
One
amazing.
follow-up question.
Yeah.
Okay, this AI system identifies that person A is not going to come 98%. Am I going to, or a system is going to appoint in your experiment or in your practice, a substitute patient B was appointed, or how did you manage?
Yeah, so they then select the next person who's going to come along and fill them into that slot. There's also a human interface. There's a call centre that will call on, but also that patient that hasn't attended, we look into why they haven't attended and is referred back to the clinician and say, what do you want to do? This person's not going to turn up. We've tried to get hold of them, we can't get hold of them, and they'll look at that and make a decision. So that pathway is closed.
In that practice, was there any confusion, like you predicted that patient A may not come in, and then I also turned out to be present and replaced patient?
Yeah, co-arrival happens 1 in 50 times at the algorithm at the moment. But what we're moving to is what we call dynamic scheduling. So as a consultant, I see on average 12 patients in a clinic. If they don't turn up, that's my luck, isn't it? That's just 10 or 9 that turned up that day and I do some emails or I don't know, go on social media or whatever it is consultants do, I don't know. But if an extra one turns up, some colleagues will bring the place down. Unacceptable, too many patients overbooked again. But they never complain about the ones that don't turn up. So what we're doing, funny that, what we're doing is we're moving to a dynamic booking system to say, you're scheduled to see 12 patients. You should see them all, and we've brought this AI system in today that will guarantee that 98% of the time. But sometimes that won't happen. There'll be an extra one. We'll measure that, and next time you'll see one less. So over a period of a month, you will see the number you're meant to see, rather than 12 million slots a year going missing. If that's my relative waiting for an outpatient, I want them to be seen. I do. Any questions online at all? Yes, go ahead.
This is from Shane Gordon, who says, great to see you talk, Tony, as always. You shared loads of great innovations. Why aren't our AHSN sharing these with us in our regular contacts?
It's always nice to have a political question. Thank you, Shane. And I do need to come and meet you and have coffee. Charlotte Williams and Preeti keep telling me, go and meet Shane because they want me to become more a bit like you in South Essex. And I've said, I'm not sure I can cope with the pressure you have in your role, but we do need to. So they're now called Health Innovation Networks instead of AHSNs. They were rebranded. So I think that's an offline conversation to have, to be fair, Shane. I think you know what I mean by that. Next. We won't have another online one. They're beastly, those questions.
Oh yeah, I just had a quick question. Sorry, I know you didn't personally draw yourself, and it's really interesting to get sort of taste of that kind of using AI to kind of help you screen patients in a relatively straightforward system.
Hang on one second. Do you think they've ever seen anything like that at Mass Gen or at Johns Hopkins? But at the Homerton, you've seen it demonstrated today. World-leading AI here.
Thank you. It seems like the statistics are really successful, brilliant. I wondered if they have ratings on patient satisfaction.
Yep, I couldn't show you all the slides. I was sent at least 6 slides by each of the innovations that are up there and what they're doing. And we do have that, and I'm very happy to make that available. I had a whole slide on patient feedback. It's off the scale, amazing. Conducted proactively and prospectively. Any more online questions? That are nice now, they've all gone away now. I don't want the nasty ones. Yes, nice.
Just to put you on the spot a little bit. So, obviously, you know, the work you've done over the last 15 years. So, 2 parts of it. My concept, or the thing that's really nice about working here, is that actually there's a real appetite for innovation, which is quite unique, actually, to be honest. But what do you see as the biggest barrier, or if you can have a magic wand, what do you see as the biggest barrier to innovation in the NHS? And secondly, personally, I think the biggest barrier is the fact that there's no appetite for risk, because you can't have risk without innovation. You can't have innovation without risk. So how do you combat that, and what do you see as the biggest barrier, and how do you combat that?
Oh, that's a complex question. So I'm going to try to answer it, and if I missed a bit of it, and just so it was around what do you think is the biggest barrier to innovation, and is it about combating risk? I think you were trying to answer the question as well. So I don't think there is one single thing that outstrips the rest. There are a whole range of factors. And it's quite complex. And the National Health Service is such a complex system, I liken it a bit to intracellular mechanics. If you look at all the nucleus and the RNA and the DNA and the ribosomes and the different transport mechanisms there are, if you introduce a piece of messenger RNA into the cell and it's the right sort, there's no consciousness, the machinery will grab hold of it, and if you've got it right, it will express the spike protein on the surface that protects you from COVID. Okay? If you feed an innovation into the NHS, this huge complex machinery sometimes turns out the result of this gets nationally commissioned, but it's not very often. Like a spike protein that solves COVID, it's not very often. So it is thinking there is just one thing. I haven't observed one. There are multiple factors and issues. The status quo and vested interests of business as usual. So that's described by Clayton Christensen in his book, The Innovator's Dilemma, in 1999, how large, established, leading organisations ultimately fail. And they fail because they don't innovate. So he called that the innovator's dilemma, and how young startups come along and disrupt them in what they're doing. And his recommendation was that organisations should have some innovative entrepreneurial function within their system to allow them not to fall and fail, as General Motors did when Toyota came along, disrupted it, and then Toyota was disrupted by the South Korean car manufacturers, weren't they, themselves. So, but the NHS has done that. And we're the first healthcare sector because we brought in an entrepreneur program 8 years ago. And we have 1,300 of them now. and they are starting to change the culture. They are holding people to account, they are challenging them and checking them out. The status quo and saying, well, no, that's not right. They don't get it all over the line, and not everything happens today, but there is an acceptance now that there, and to your point of risk, I'm seeing more and more acceptance when I stand up and say, well, what's the counterfactual? What is the risk of today? How many people are waiting, and how long are they going to wait, and how much harm are they going to come to? And you're saying, I can't bring in this AI system of teledermatology to look at skin lesions, which has 98% specificity, so if it's benign, I can be better than a dermatologist seeing you, but it will at least help us triage the figures. And some people say, no, we can't do that and take that forward. I'm going, what's the risk? It's our job to look at that risk and then make the case. I think we're seeing more willingness than I've seen in my 10 years at NHS England at the centre to take measured risks, because more of the same isn't going to get us to the place we need to be in. We're all exhausted. We're whacked. I am. I'm sure you all are. It doesn't feel how it used to. I used to go to dinners at my consultant's house, and one of my consultants, I shouldn't say, he had a wine fridge. And before his day surgery list, we'd go there at lunch and we'd have a glass of wine. That would be acceptable. I understand that. I understand why. Things have changed. We've lost it, haven't we, somewhere along the way, and we need to gain that back. So I think status quo and getting over business as usual is a big thing, but there are loads of factors, there's not just one. Any more? We done? We done online?
Brilliant. Thank
Amazing.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great.
And thank you everyone for joining us. I hope we all learned something. I certainly learned something from you guys, all of our brilliant speakers, and we will be sending you some feedback. Also, thank you very much to the technology team and our patrons. I don't know, these guys did all that.